My granddaughter is terrified of her mother, but she will not tell me why. Last night she slipped me a note that said, "Grandpa, look under the boat in the garage, you will know the whole truth." So I went to check and I screamed when I saw what my daughter-in-law was hiding. My name is Winston Carter, and I am 68 years old. For the last 6 months, my family has treated me like a senile old man who cannot even hold a spoon without shaking. But they do not know that I spent 30 years assembling fighter jet engines for the Air Force. My hands are steady when I need them to be, but what I found under that boat shook me to my very core. Before I tell you what I found, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. The night my life changed forever started like any other Tuesday in our suburban Maryland home. The dining room was cold despite the heating being on. My son Tyrone sat at the head of the table looking exhausted. He is a good man, a successful architect, but lately he looks like a ghost of himself. His skin is gray and his eyes are always heavy. Beside him sat his wife Victoria. She is a beautiful woman with blonde hair and ice blue eyes, but her smile never reaches them. And then there was my granddaughter Zoe, 8 years old, pushing peas around her plate and refusing to look up. I lifted my spoon to eat the gumbo. It was my late wife Althea's recipe, but Victoria always made it too salty. My hand has a slight tremor. It is a minor nerve issue from years of working with heavy machinery, but Victoria calls it the early stages of Parkinson's. She tells everyone I am losing my motor skills. As I brought the spoon to my mouth, I felt a sharp nudge against my elbow. It was subtle but deliberate. The red broth splashed all over my clean white shirt and onto the tablecloth. The sound of the spoon clattering against the bowl echoed in the silence. "Oh," Victoria sighed loudly, dropping her fork as if I had committed a crime. She grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the tablecloth, aggressively ignoring the hot soup burning my chest. "Tyrone, look at this," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "He cannot even feed himself anymore. It is getting worse every day." Tyrone rubbed his temples without looking at me. "It is just an accident, Vic," he mumbled. "It is not an accident, Ty," she snapped. "It is a pattern. He is a danger to himself. What if he spills boiling water next time? What if he drops a knife? What if he hurts Zoe?" I saw Zoe flinch at her name. She gripped her fork so hard her knuckles turned white. I picked up my spoon with a steady hand and looked Victoria in the eye. "I did not spill it, Victoria," I said calmly. "You bumped my arm." She let out a cruel, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, listen to him. Now he is paranoid too. That is the dementia talking, Ty. Dr. Evans said this would happen. The denial. The accusations." She turned to my son, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "Honey, I called Sunny Hill today. They have a private room available starting next week. It is for the best. He needs professional care that we just cannot provide. Sunny Hill." The name sounded pleasant, but everyone in town knew it was a warehouse for the unwanted elderly. It was a place people went to die alone. Tyrone finally looked at me. His eyes were filled with guilt and exhaustion. "Dad, maybe we should just go look at it, just to see. You might like the community." I felt a crack in my heart. My son, the boy I raised alone after Althea passed, was giving up on me. He was letting this woman push me out of my own home. The home I paid for, the home I built the deck for with my own 2 hands. "I am not going to a home, son," I said, my voice low and firm. "I am perfectly capable." Victoria rolled her eyes and stood up. "You are impossible, Winston. Look at your shirt. You are a mess. Go clean yourself up before you ruin the chair too." I stood up slowly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Tyrone that his wife was a liar. But I knew how it would look. The angry, confused old man yelling at the caring daughter-in-law. That was the narrative she was building. So I held my tongue. I walked to the kitchen, feeling Tyrone's pity burning into my back. I stood by the kitchen sink, running cold water over the stain on my shirt. I looked at my hands. These hands had calibrated engines worth millions of dollars. These hands had fixed everything from leaky faucets to broken hearts. They were not the hands of an invalid. I heard a soft noise behind me. It was Zoe. She had come into the kitchen for a glass of water. She looked toward the dining room to make sure her mother was not watching. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Zoe, honey, are you okay?" I whispered. She did not speak. She rushed forward and hugged my waist, burying her face in my stomach. She was trembling. I felt her small hand slip something into my trouser pocket. "Please do not go, Grandpa," she whispered, so quiet I almost missed it. Do not eat the vitamins. Zoe. Victoria's voice rang out from the hallway. What are you doing in there? Come finish your dinner. Zoe pulled away instantly. She looked at me one last time, her eyes pleading before running back to the dining room. I waited until my heart slowed down. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was torn from a school notebook. The handwriting was hurried and messy. Grandpa, look under Mom's boat in the garage. Do not let her see. You will know the truth. I stared at the note. Victoria had a small wooden canoe in the garage she claimed she was restoring. She spent hours in there, but I never saw any progress on the boat. She always kept the garage locked and she wore the key around her neck. I finished cleaning my shirt and went back to the table. I sat down and finished my dinner in silence. I watched Victoria. She was smiling now, talking about a vacation she wanted to take to Italy once things settled down. She looked at Tyrone with a predatory gaze. I realized then that my son was not just tired. He looked sick. His skin was clammy and his hand shook when he lifted his water glass. That night the house was silent. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 2 a.m. I lay in bed fully dressed under the covers. I knew Victoria was a light sleeper. I had to be silent. I remembered my training. I breathed slowly to lower my heart rate. I slid out of bed and moved to the door. I did not wear shoes. Socks were quieter on the hardwood floors. I crept down the hallway. I passed Tyrone and Victoria's bedroom. I could hear Tyrone's heavy, labored breathing. It sounded like fluid in his lungs. I paused. Althea had sounded like that in her final weeks. The doctor said it was heart failure, but Tyrone was 38. He was an athlete in college. Why was his heart failing? I moved to the garage door. Locked. Of course. But Victoria underestimated who she was dealing with. She thought I was just a retired mechanic. She did not know that in the Air Force I worked in special operations logistics. I knew how to bypass a standard residential lock. I took a thin piece of wire I had hidden in my reading glasses case. I knelt by the door. My hands, the hands she claimed were useless, were steady as a rock. I felt the pins inside the lock. 1, 2, click. The door opened silently. I slipped inside and closed it behind me, not daring to turn on the light. The garage smelled of sawdust and varnish, but underneath that there was a chemical smell, something bitter like almonds. I pulled a small flashlight from my pocket and covered the lens with my fingers to dim the beam. The canoe was in the center of the room, upside down on 2 sawhorses. It was covered in a tarp. I moved toward it. My knees ached, but I ignored the pain. Zoe's note said, under the boat. I crouched down and shone the light under the hollow of the overturned canoe. At first I saw nothing but the wooden ribs of the boat, but then I noticed something odd. One of the crossbeams looked thicker than the others. I reached up and touched it. It was not wood. It was a false bottom taped securely with duct tape. I pulled out my pocket knife. I sliced the tape carefully, holding my breath. A black hard-shell briefcase slid down into my hands. It was heavy. I set it on the concrete floor. It had a combination lock. 3 digits. I thought about Victoria. She was arrogant, but she was not creative. I tried her birthday. Nothing. I tried Tyrone's birthday. Nothing. Then I tried the date she moved into this house. Click. The latches popped open. I lifted the lid and shone my light inside. My blood ran cold. The first thing I saw was a stack of documents. I picked up the top one. It was a life insurance policy. A new one. Dated just 7 days ago. It insured Tyrone Carter's life for $5 million. The beneficiary was Victoria Carter. $5 million. My son was worth a fortune to her, but only if he was dead. I flipped through the pages. There was a clause highlighted in yellow. In the event of death by natural causes, specifically cardiac arrest, the payout is immediate. My hands started to shake, and this time it wasn't from any disease. It was pure rage. Beneath the policy was a small, clear plastic bag containing a glass vial. There was no label on it. Inside was a fine white powder. I carefully lifted the vial. I unscrewed the cap and sniffed it from a safe distance. The bitter almond smell hit me again. Digitalis. Foxglove. I knew this poison. In small doses, it treats heart conditions. In large doses, or given to a healthy man over time, it causes irregular heartbeats, nausea, exhaustion, and eventually a massive heart attack that looks completely natural. I flashed back to dinner. Tyrone's gray skin. His shaking hands. His labored breathing. She wasn't just waiting for him to die. She was killing him. Every single day. And then I saw the third item in the briefcase. It was a file folder labeled Althea. My wife. My sweet Althea, who died 5 years ago. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of Althea's medical records. But there were notes written in the margins in Victoria's handwriting. Notes like dosage too low and increased frequency on weekends. I covered my mouth to stop the scream that was rising in my throat. Althea didn't die of natural heart failure. Victoria had killed her. She had practiced on my wife to perfect the method she was now using on my son. I was living with a serial killer, a monster who smiled at me over breakfast while poisoning my son's coffee. Suddenly I heard a sound that made my heart stop. Footsteps. Above me. The floorboards creaked directly over the garage. Then the sound of the door at the top of the stairs opening. I clicked the flashlight off. I was plunged into total darkness. "Who is down there?" Victoria's voice cut through the silence. It was not the sweet voice she used in public. It was cold, sharp, and dangerous. I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. Click, clack, click, clack. She was wearing her heels. She never walked barefoot. I scrambled to shove the documents back into the briefcase. I had to get it back under the boat. If she saw this, she would know the game was up. And if she knew I wouldn't make it to the nursing home. I would be dead by morning. I managed to jam the case back into the false bottom and press the tape down just as the garage light flickered on. I was crouching behind the lawnmower, praying my shadow wouldn't give me away. Victoria walked into the center of the garage. She was wearing a silk robe, and in her hand, she held a long, sharp paring knife. She wasn't getting a midnight snack. She was hunting. "Winston," she called out. "I know you are in here." I heard the door. She moved slowly, checking the corners. She walked toward the boat. She ran her hand along the tarp. "You are getting sloppy, old man," she whispered. She turned and looked directly at the lawnmower. I held my breath. I tightened my grip on the heavy wrench I had grabbed from the workbench. I was 68 years old, but I would not let this woman kill my son. She took a step toward me, raising the knife. Dad Tyrone's voice came from the top of the stairs. Victoria spun around, hiding the knife behind the folds of her robe in a split second. Her face transformed instantly from a mask of fury to a look of concern. "Oh, honey, you scared me," she said. "I heard a noise. I think your father is wandering again. I am so worried he might hurt himself." I stood up slowly from behind the lawnmower. I had to play the part. I had to buy time. I blinked my eyes confusedly and let my hands shake. Where am I?" I stammered. "I was looking for Althea. She said she was in the garden." Victoria looked at me with pure venom, but she smiled for Tyrone. "See, sweetie," she said to my son. "He is hallucinating. He thinks he is in the garden. It is the middle of the night." Tyrone came down the stairs looking weak and pale. He put his arm around me. "Come on, Dad. Let's get you back to bed." "Althea isn't here." I leaned on my son, feeling his rib cage through his pajamas. He was wasting away. I looked at Victoria over his shoulder. She mouthed 3 words to me. 3 days. She wasn't talking about the nursing home. She was giving me a timeline. Tyrone had 3 days left to live. I let them lead me back to my room. But as soon as the door clicked shut, I dropped the act. I went to my closet and pulled out my old work boots. I pried open the heel of the left boot. Inside was a burner phone and a flash drive I had kept for emergencies. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. My old friend Paris. He wasn't just a drinking buddy. He was the best criminal defense attorney in the state, and he owed me a favor. I dialed the number in the dark. "Paris," I whispered. "It is Winston. I need you to wake up. We have a problem. A $5 million problem. And I think I am next on the list." The next morning, the war began. But Victoria struck first. I walked into the kitchen to find 2 large men in white uniforms standing by the island. Victoria was crying fake tears into a handkerchief. "There he is," she sobbed. "Please, you have to help us. He threatened us with a knife last night. He is dangerous." The men turned to me. "Mr. Carter, please come with us quietly," one of them said. "We are here to take you to Sunny Hill." Tyrone was sitting at the table, his head in his hands. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I cannot risk Zoe's safety. Vic said you had a knife." She had planted the knife, the same knife she was hunting me with. I looked at Zoe. She was standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the men, then at me. I knew if I fought, they would sedate me. If I was sedated, I couldn't save Tyrone. I raised my hands. "I will go," I said calmly. Victoria stopped crying instantly. A smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. She thought she had won. She thought she was shipping me off to rot while she finished off my son. But as the men led me past Zoe, I pretended to stumble. I leaned in close to her ear. "Use the toy," I whispered. "Record everything. Do not eat the food." Zoe nodded imperceptibly. She slipped her small plastic toy recorder into my jacket pocket as I passed. I was walked out to the van. As the doors closed, I saw Victoria watching from the window. She waved at me. "Goodbye, Winston," she mouthed. I sat back in the van and felt the hard plastic of Zoe's toy in my pocket. I also felt the small vial of powder I had managed to steal from the briefcase the night before. I wasn't going to Sunny Hill to stay. I was going there to break out. And when I came back, I wasn't going to be Winston the grandfather. I was going to be Winston the soldier, and I was going to bring hell with me. My knees pressed against the cold concrete floor of the garage as I stared at the black briefcase. It sat there like a dark monolith in the dim beam of my flashlight. The silence of the house above pressed down on me heavy and suffocating. I knew I had minutes, maybe seconds, before Victoria might decide to check on her little restoration project again. My hands hovered over the combination lock. They were old hands, weathered by time and work the skin papery and spotted. But beneath the surface, the muscles remembered. They remembered the delicate tension of a torque wrench on a jet turbine. They remembered the subtle vibration of a misaligned gear. Victoria called them shaky. She called them useless. She was about to find out just how steady they could be. I did not need to see the numbers. Sight would have been a hindrance in the dark. I needed to feel. I placed my thumb against the first tumbler. I applied the slightest amount of pressure to the latch, creating tension. I rotated the dial slowly. The friction changed. The metal gritted against metal, microscopic imperfections grinding together. I felt a tiny skip. A release of tension so subtle only someone who had spent 40 years listening to machines would notice. Click. The sound was no louder than a cricket's chirp, but in the silence of the garage it sounded like a gunshot. I froze, eyes darting to the door at the top of the stairs. Nothing, just the settling of the house and the hum of the refrigerator upstairs. I moved to the second dial. My breathing was shallow and controlled, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The fear was there, a cold knot in my stomach, but I pushed it down. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. I found the second number. Another soft click. Then the third. The latch sprang open with a metallic snap that echoed off the concrete walls. I lifted the lid. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the contents. It was not money. It was not jewelry. It was a stack of papers, crisp and white, sitting on top of a velvet lining. I picked up the document on top. The paper felt heavy, expensive. I adjusted my glasses and squinted at the text. It was a life insurance policy. The name at the top was Tyrone Carter, my son, my only boy. I scanned the details. The coverage amount was $5 million. $5 million. A number that could buy a new life. A number that could justify a lot of sins to a woman like Victoria. I looked at the date. It had been signed just 1 week ago. Tyrone's signature was at the bottom, but it looked shaky, weak, just like he had been lately. Had he even known what he was signing, or had she slid it under his nose while he was groggy from her poisoned meals? My eyes moved to the beneficiary line. Victoria Carter, sole beneficiary. No trust for Zoe. Nothing for me, just her. Beneath the papers lay a small, clear plastic bag. Inside it was a glass vial about the size of my thumb. It had no label, no pharmacy markings, no warnings, just clear glass and a fine white powder inside. I reached for it. My fingers brushed the cool glass. This was it. This was the weapon. A gun makes noise. A knife leaves a mess. But this was silent. This was clean. This was how a predator hunted in a suburban home. Suddenly a sound cut through the air. It was the creak of a floorboard, directly above my head. I froze. My hand snapped back from the briefcase. I clicked off the flashlight, instantly plunging the garage into absolute darkness. I listened. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate. They were moving toward the door that led down to the garage. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I scrambled backward, crab walking on my hands and feet, moving away from the boat and into the deep shadows behind a stack of old tires and the lawnmower. The doorknob turned. The rattle was deafening. A slice of yellow light cut across the garage floor as the door opened. I held my breath. I pressed my back against the cold wall, making myself as small as possible. Victoria stood at the top of the stairs. I could not see her face, only her silhouette framed by the hallway light. She was wearing a long silk robe. She stood there for a long moment, motionless, listening. She was like a hawk scanning the grass for a mouse. Then she took a step down. The wooden stair groaned under her weight. I squeezed my eyes shut. If she came down, if she turned on the overhead light, she would see the briefcase. I had left it open. I had not had time to close it or put it back under the false bottom of the boat. It was sitting right there on the concrete, a black square of evidence screaming for attention. She took another step, then another. She was coming down. I opened my eyes. Through the gap between the tires, I saw her feet hit the concrete floor. She was wearing soft slippers. She moved silently now. She did not turn on the main light. Instead, she pulled a phone from her pocket and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept across the room. It danced over the workbench, the tool rack, the old bicycle. It moved toward the center of the room, toward the boat. My lungs burned. I needed to breathe, but I dared not exhale. The beam hit the tarp covering the boat. Victoria walked toward it. She ran her hand along the canvas. She was checking. She wanted to make sure her secret was still safe. She moved around the boat. The light swept over the floor. It passed within inches of the open briefcase. I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. She had to see it. It was right there. But she didn't look down. Her eyes were fixed on the boat itself. She was obsessed with the hiding spot, not the floor. She adjusted the tarp, pulling it tighter. She stopped. She stood perfectly still, just 3 feet from where I was hiding. I could smell her perfume. It was expensive, floral, and suffocating. It was the smell of deception. She turned her back to me. She was looking at the boat, admiring her handiwork. 3 days, Tyrone, she whispered. Her voice was low, a husky murmur that sounded more like a lover's caress than a death sentence. Just 3 more days and we are free. The words hung in the cold air. 3 days. That was the timeline. That was how much sand was left in my son's hourglass. She wasn't just waiting for him to die. She had a schedule. She let out a soft, chilling laugh. It was a sound devoid of any warmth. It was the sound of someone counting money in their head. She turned back toward the stairs. The flashlight beam swung wildly, slashing across the walls. For a split second, the light hit the open briefcase. I flinched. This was it. But she didn't stop. She was already walking away, her mind filled with visions of $5 million. She didn't see the black case against the dark floor. She didn't see the evidence of her own sloppiness. Her arrogance blinded her. She thought she was the only intelligent person in this house. She thought I was a vegetable and Tyrone was a corpse. She never imagined that the old man she mocked was crouching in the shadows, watching her every move. She walked up the stairs. The door closed. The lock clicked. Darkness returned. I let out a breath that shuddered through my entire body. I slumped against the tires, my shirt soaked in cold sweat. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5. I had to be sure she wasn't coming back. When my pulse finally slowed to a rhythm that wouldn't kill me, I crawled back to the briefcase. I turned my flashlight back on, shielding the light with my trembling hand. I looked at the vial again. I knew I couldn't take the whole thing. If she checked and found it missing, she would know someone was on to her. She would accelerate her timeline. Tyrone wouldn't have 3 days. He would have 3 hours. I needed a sample. I needed proof that wasn't just a senile old man's story. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small empty pill bottle. It was for my blood pressure medication, the one I had finished yesterday. I hadn't thrown it away because I used them to store screws and washers in the workshop. A habit Victoria hated. A habit that was about to save my son. I carefully unscrewed the cap of the glass vial. I tilted it over my plastic bottle and tapped it gently. A small amount of the white powder slid out, just a pinch. Enough for a lab to analyze, enough to send her to prison for the rest of her life. I screwed the cap back on the vial and placed it exactly where it had been in the plastic bag. I closed the briefcase. I spun the dials on the lock. I slid it back into the false bottom of the boat and pressed the duct tape down, smoothing it out so it looked undisturbed. I held the plastic bottle in my hand. I brought it up to my nose and took a cautious sniff. The smell hit me instantly. It was faint, sweet, and cloying. Bitter almonds. My mind reeled. The garage spun around me. I was not in the garage anymore. I was back in our bedroom 5 years ago. I was sitting by the bed holding Althea's hand. She was pale, her breathing shallow and rattling. The doctor said it was congestive heart failure. They said her heart was just tired. I leaned down to kiss her forehead. She breathed out a weak, final exhalation, and I smelled it. That same smell. Sweet, bitter, almonds. I had thought it was her medicine. I had thought it was just the smell of sickness. But it wasn't. I remembered Victoria standing in the doorway that day. She was holding a tray with a teapot. She had been taking care of Althea for weeks, making her tea, giving her soup, ensuring she was comfortable. "She is at peace now, Winston," Victoria had said. She didn't cry. She just watched. A sob ripped its way out of my throat, but I stifled it with my hand. It wasn't heart failure. It wasn't old age. Victoria had killed Althea. She had tested her poison on my wife. She had used Althea as a practice run to see if she could get away with it, to see if the doctors would suspect, to see if the insurance would pay out. And they did. They paid out a small policy Althea had, not millions, but enough to whet Victoria's appetite, enough to make her want more. My knees gave out and I slumped to the floor. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. I had let the killer into our home. I had thanked her for taking care of my dying wife. I had cooked dinner for the woman who murdered the love of my life. The grief was a physical weight crushing my chest, but then the grief turned into something else. It hardened. It turned into a cold, sharp block of ice in my gut. She took my wife. Now she wanted my son. I looked at the plastic bottle in my hand. This wasn't just powder. This was justice. I stood up. My knees cracked, but my legs held. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my oily hand. "Not this time, Rebecca," I whispered into the darkness using the name my lawyer friend had found. "You took Althea, but you are not taking Tyrone, and you are definitely not taking me." I slipped the bottle into my sock, pushing it deep down so it wouldn't fall out. I crept back to the door. I used my wire to lock it from the inside, leaving it exactly as I found it. I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair by the window watching the sunrise. I watched the world wake up indifferent to the monsters living in its suburbs. I was done being the victim. I was done being the confused old man. Victoria wanted a war. She wanted to play God with our lives. Well, she was about to learn that she picked a fight with the wrong soldier. I had survived wars, poverty, and loss. I would survive her, and when I was done with her, she would wish she had never set foot in the Carter house. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, painting stripes of light across the linoleum floor, but the warmth did not reach the breakfast table. My son Tyrone sat hunched over his plate of untouched eggs, his breathing ragged and wet. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. His skin had a translucent grayish quality that terrified me. I stood by the coffee pot, my knuckles white as I gripped the counter. I watched him. I watched every rise and fall of his chest, praying it wouldn't be his last. Suddenly, Tyrone dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the ceramic plate. He grabbed his chest with both hands, his fingers digging into his shirt. A guttural groan escaped his lips, a sound of pure animalistic pain. "Dad," he gasped. "It hurts. I cannot breathe." I dropped the dish towel and lunged for the wall phone. My military training kicked in. Assess, react, save. I needed to call 911. I needed paramedics here now. His heart was failing. The poison was doing exactly what Victoria intended. I had the receiver in my hand and was dialing 9 when a cold hand clamped over my wrist. Victoria stood there. She was dressed in a crisp white blouse and black slacks, looking immaculate and terrifyingly calm. She pressed the receiver hook down, disconnecting the line. "Put the phone down, Winston," she said, her voice smooth and devoid of panic. "You are overreacting. It is just heartburn. I told him not to eat that spicy sausage last night." "Heartburn," I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. "Look at him, Victoria. He is gray. He is sweating through his clothes. This is a heart attack. Get out of my way!" I tried to shove past her, but she stepped in front of me, blocking my path to my son. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. She shook it, the rattle of pills sounding like the shake of a rattlesnake's tail. "He does not need an ambulance," she said, her eyes boring into mine. "He needs his heart medication, his special vitamin supplement. Dr. Evans said this would happen if he missed a dose. She popped the cap and shook a single capsule into her palm. It was a clear gelatin capsule filled with white powder, the same white powder I had seen in the garage, the same bitter almond dust that killed Althea. She held the pill out to me. Her eyes dared me. She was testing me. She wanted to see if the old man was obedient. She wanted to make me complicit in my own son's murder. Here she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Be useful for once, Dad. Give him his medicine. He trusts you. He will take it from you. I looked at the pill in her palm. It wasn't medicine. It was a bullet. If Tyrone swallowed that concentrated dose of digitalis in his weakened state, his heart wouldn't just stabilize. It would stop. It would seize up and never beat again. I looked at Tyrone. He was slumped in the chair, his eyes rolling back in his head. He was dying right in front of me. I could not let him take that pill. I slapped her hand. I didn't think. I just reacted. I swung my arm with all the strength I had left. I hit her hand hard. The orange bottle flew across the room, bouncing off the refrigerator. The single capsule in her palm launched into the air and landed somewhere under the stove. No, I roared. Do not touch him. The silence that followed was absolute. For a second, the only sound was Tyrone's wheezing breaths. Victoria stood frozen, staring at her empty hand. Her face turned red, then purple. The mask of the concerned wife vanished, replaced by the face of a demon. Then she moved. Faster than I thought possible, her hand lashed out and connected with my cheek. The slap was blinding. It wasn't a warning tap. It was a full-force blow meant to hurt, meant to humiliate. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the floor. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine. I stumbled back, gripping the counter to keep from falling. "You crazy old man," she screamed. She didn't just scream it. She shrieked it at the top of her lungs, projecting her voice, so the neighbors, the mailman, and God himself could hear. "Are you trying to kill your son? Are you insane?" She threw herself over Tyrone, wrapping her arms around his neck in a chokehold she disguised as a hug. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fake terror. Ty, can you hear me? Your father just attacked you. He knocked your medicine away. He is trying to kill us." I stood there blinking, trying to clear the spots from my vision. My face burned where she had hit me. I looked for my glasses, but everything was a blur. "Victoria, stop!" I pleaded, my voice hoarse. "It is poison." "I know what it is." "Liar," she screamed over me. She turned to Tyrone, stroking his sweat-slicked hair. "Oh my God, Ty. He has finally snapped. He is violent. I told you this would happen. He thinks I am poisoning you. He is having a psychotic break." Tyrone lifted his head. He looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes broke me more than the slap ever could. He was afraid of me. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike. The man I walked through grief with looked at me as if I were a monster. He didn't see his father. He saw a confused, violent old man who had just assaulted his wife and denied him relief from his pain. Dad Tyrone wheezed, tears leaking from his eyes. Why did you do that? She is just trying to help me." "No, son," I said, taking a step forward, my hands outstretched. "Please listen. Under the boat. You have to look under the boat." "Stay back," Victoria yelled. She grabbed a steak knife from the table and pointed it at me. "Do not come near him. I will defend my husband." She was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. She had turned the victim into the aggressor in 10 seconds flat. She stood between me and my dying son holding a weapon, and yet I was the one who looked dangerous. I froze. I couldn't move forward. If I struggled with her, if I tried to take the knife, the police would see bruises on her. They would see a weapon. They would lock me up and throw away the key. Victoria lowered the knife slightly, but kept her eyes fixed on me. She reached for her cell phone on the table with her free hand. "I cannot do this anymore," she sobbed, tears instantly flowing down her cheeks. "I tried, Ty. I really tried to keep him home. But he is dangerous. He's going to kill one of us in our sleep." She dialed a number. It wasn't 911. She had a specific number on speed dial. "Dr. Evans," she said into the phone, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "It is Victoria Carter. You have to come. Now. It is Winston. He has become violent. He hit me. He is hallucinating. He thinks I am trying to poison Tyrone." Yes, bring the order. We need him committed immediately." She hung up and looked at me. A slow, cold smile spread across her face just for a second before she returned to her performance. "And one more thing," she said to Tyrone, who was still gasping for air. "We have to think about Zoe. If he hurts you, Ty, imagine what he could do to a little girl. He is a ticking time bomb. That was the checkmate. Using my granddaughter. Using the innocent child I loved more than life itself to seal my fate. Tyrone closed his eyes. He let out a long, defeated sigh. "Okay, Vic," he whispered. "Okay. Call them. Get him out of here." I felt my legs give out. I sank onto one of the kitchen chairs. I didn't fight anymore. There was no point in fighting in this kitchen. The battle here was lost. Victoria rushed to the cabinet and grabbed another bottle of pills. A different one. Probably just aspirin or a mild sedative to calm Tyrone down and make him think she saved him. She gave it to him with a glass of water. There she cooed. "Mommy is here. Mommy has you." I sat there rubbing my stinging cheek. I watched her poison my son's mind after failing to poison his body. I realized then that Dr. Sterling's note was wrong. Running wasn't enough. If I ran, Tyrone died. If I ran, Zoe was next. I sat still. I let them think I was broken. I let them think the dementia had won. But inside my mind was racing. I thought about the vial in my sock. I thought about the recording device Zoe had. I thought about my friend Paris. Let them take me, I thought. Let them take me to the asylum. It is easier to break out of a prison than it is to break out of a lie. I looked at Victoria one last time. She was hugging Tyrone, staring at me over his shoulder with dead shark eyes. "You won this round, Rebecca," I thought. "But the war has just begun, and you just made the biggest mistake of your life. You left the soldier alive." The kitchen air was thick with tension and the smell of burnt toast. My cheeks still throbbed from where Victoria had slapped me, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the sight of my son. Tyrone sat at the table with his head in his hands, refusing to look at me. He was broken. He was a shell of the man I had raised. Victoria stood over him with her hand on his shoulder, whispering poison into his ear, playing the role of the terrified wife perfectly. I stood by the sink, cornered like an animal, my breathing heavy and controlled. Then the front door opened. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The heavy, arrogant footsteps gave him away. Dr. Evans walked into the kitchen carrying a black medical bag. He was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that looked like it had been bought from a catalog. He wore a tweed jacket that cost more than my first car. He was the family doctor. He was the man who had treated Althea, and he was the man Victoria called when she needed a problem to disappear. Winston, Dr. Evans said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Victoria tells me you are having a bad episode. She says you became violent." I straightened my back. "I am not having an episode, doctor. I am trying to stop a murder." Dr. Evans sighed and shook his head, looking at Tyrone. "You see, Ty, this is classic acute psychosis. The paranoia, the delusions of persecution, the aggression toward caregivers. It is advancing faster than we anticipated." He did not even look at me. He spoke about me as if I were a piece of furniture that had suddenly caught fire. He set his bag on the counter and opened it. The metallic click of the latch echoed in the silent room. I stepped forward. "You are lying, Evans. I know about the digitalis. I know about the insurance policy." Victoria let out a small, frightened gasp. "Oh God, Ty. Listen to him. He is making things up again. He thinks we are in a spy movie." Dr. Evans pulled a syringe from his bag. He uncapped a small vial of clear liquid. He moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had done this many times before. "We need to calm him down immediately," Evans said, "for his own safety and yours." He walked toward me. The needle glinted in the kitchen light. "Do not come near me," I warned. I clenched my fists. I was 68, but I still knew how to break a man's jaw. Tyrone stood up suddenly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Dad, please. Just let him help you. You are scaring Zoe. You are scaring me." My son's eyes were pleading. He truly believed I was losing my mind. Victoria had done her job well. If I fought the doctor, I would only prove her point. If I broke Evan's jaw, I would be the violent monster she claimed I was. The police would come. I would be put in cuffs. I would lose any chance of saving them. I looked at the needle. Then I looked at Victoria. She was watching me with a predatory intensity. She wanted me to fight. She wanted a show. I made a choice. It was the hardest choice of my life. I relaxed my hands. I unballed my fists. I stood perfectly still. "Do it," I said. Evans hesitated for a fraction of a second, surprised by my surrender. Then he stepped in. I felt the cold bite of the steel needle sliding into my shoulder muscle. He depressed the plunger. The liquid burned as it entered my bloodstream. "There," Evans said, stepping back. "That will help you sleep, Winston." I felt the effects almost instantly. My limbs felt heavy. The room began to swim, but I did not fight the sensation. Instead, I leaned into it. I let my knees buckle. I let my eyelids flutter. I slumped against the cabinets and slid down to the floor. I needed them to think I was out. I needed them to think the old soldier was neutralized. My head hit the linoleum. I lay there, my eyes closed to mere slits, my breathing slow and rhythmic. The drug was strong, a heavy sedative likely Haldol or Ativan, but my metabolism had always been fast. I bit the inside of my cheek hard, using the sharp pain to anchor my mind, fighting the fog that tried to pull me under. I was not a mechanic. That was the cover I gave my neighbors. That was what I told Tyrone so he would not worry when I went on long trips during his childhood. For 30 years, I was a security systems engineer for the Air Force. I designed surveillance protocols for secure facilities. I built bugs that could fit inside a button. I knew how to listen when people thought they were alone, and I never went into a hostile environment unprepared. Before I left my bedroom that morning, I had replaced the top button of my flannel shirt. It looked like a standard plastic button, slightly scuffed and old, but inside it housed a high-fidelity microphone and a recording chip with 12 hours of battery life. It was a prototype I had kept from the 90s, old tech but reliable. As I lay on the floor, I moved my hand subtly across my chest. I pretended to scratch an itch. My thumb pressed against the button. One short click. The red light on the recording unit inside would be blinking invisible to the naked eye. We were live. I heard footsteps approach me. I smelled the expensive leather of Evans' shoes near my face. "He is out," Evans said. He kicked my leg gently. No reaction. Victoria let out a long breath. Finally. God, he is exhausting. I thought he was going to break my wrist. I heard the rustle of fabric. I opened my eyes a fraction of a millimeter. Through the haze of my eyelashes, I saw Victoria walk over to Evans. She did not hug him like a friend. She ran her hand down his arm in a way that was intimate, possessive. She leaned into him. "You took too long to get here," she hissed. He almost called 911. "I got here as fast as I could, Vic." Evans replied, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Traffic was a nightmare. Is the policy secured?" "It is in the safe," she said. But Winston found the copy in the garage. He knows Elliot. He knows everything. Evans looked down at my prone body. "Does he have proof?" "He was babbling about a vial," she said, "but I checked the briefcase. The digitalis is still there. He didn't take it. He is just guessing. He is a senile old fool." Evans chuckled darkly. "Well, he won't be babbling to anyone where he is going. The facility is expecting him. I signed the involuntary commitment papers this morning. Acute paranoid schizophrenia with violent tendencies. They will keep him sedated for a week. By the time he wakes up enough to talk, no one will listen." "And Tyrone?" Evans asked. Victoria looked toward the living room where Tyrone had gone to sit down. "He is weak," she whispered. The last dose hit him hard. "Increase it," Evans said. His voice was cold, clinical. "Don't wait 3 days. Finish it. Give him a double dose tonight in his sleep. We need this done, Vic. I have investors waiting on my buy-in. I need my share of that $5 million. A double dose." My heart slammed against my ribs. I had to stop breathing for a second to keep my chest from heaving. They were moving the timeline up. Tyrone didn't have 3 days. He had hours. "Do not worry," Victoria purred. "I will make him a special nightcap. He will sleep right through his own heart failure. And by the time the coroner gets here, Winston will be locked away in a padded room raving about conspiracies. It is perfect. Perfect." She called the murder of her husband and the imprisonment of his father perfect. I felt a rage so hot it burned through the sedative fog. I wanted to leap up. I wanted to tear them apart with my bare hands. But I couldn't. Not yet. I was one old man against 2 killers and a system that believed I was crazy. If I got up now, Evans would just inject me again, and this time he might use something lethal. I had the recording. I had the proof. Now I just needed to survive the transport. The sound of a siren cut through the air. It grew louder, wailing like a banshee until it cut off abruptly in front of our house. "The ambulance is here," Evans announced. "Let's get this trash out of your kitchen." Heavy boots stomped into the house. I felt rough hands grab my shoulders and legs. I went limp, playing the part of the unconscious burden. They lifted me onto a gurney, the straps tightened across my chest and legs binding me. As they wheeled me out of the kitchen, I saw my house upside down, the ceiling fan spinning lazily, the family photos on the wall, photos of me and Althea, photos of Tyrone's graduation. Lies on a wall. They wheeled me out the front door. The bright sunlight stung my eyes even through my closed lids. I heard the neighbors whispering. Poor Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Higgins from next door said, "She is a saint for dealing with him this long." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Mrs. Higgins that the saint was a devil. Then I heard a sound that broke my heart. "Grandpa." It was Zoe. She had been hiding. She must have been watching from the top of the stairs. I heard her small feet pounding on the pavement. She was running after the gurney. "Zoe, get back inside," Victoria shouted. But Zoe didn't stop. I felt her small hand grab the metal rail of the gurney. "Grandpa, wake up," she screamed. Her voice was raw with terror. "Please wake up." I fought to open my eyes. I managed to crack them open just enough to see her face. She was running alongside me, tears streaming down her cheeks, her face red and contorted with fear. She looked at me, and for a second our eyes locked. She saw I was awake. She saw the message in my eyes. I am coming back. I tried to project the thought into her mind. I am coming back. One of the paramedics pushed her gently away. "Step back, little girl. He needs to go to the hospital." Zoe stumbled but kept running. She looked at the paramedic, then at her mother standing on the porch, then back at me. She knew she couldn't say the truth. She knew her mother would hurt her, but she had to warn me. She had to give me the final piece of the puzzle. "Grandpa?" She shrieked, her voice cracking. "Do not drink the orange juice. Please do not drink the orange juice." Victoria lunged forward and grabbed Zoe by the arm, yanking her back so hard the girl's feet left the ground. "Shut up, Zoe," Victoria hissed, clamping a hand over my granddaughter's mouth. The paramedic looked confused. "Orange juice? He is diabetic," Victoria lied smoothly, dragging a struggling Zoe back toward the house. "She is just worried about his sugar." She is a sweet girl. But I knew. I knew exactly what it meant. Orange juice. Tyrone drank a glass of fresh, squeezed orange juice every single night before bed. It was his routine. It was the only thing he could keep down lately. Victoria always made it for him. She said the vitamin C was good for his immunity. That was the delivery system. That was how she was poisoning him. The bitter taste of the digitalis would be masked by the acidity and sweetness of the oranges. The doors of the ambulance slammed shut, sealing me in the dim interior. The engine roared to life. We began to move. I lay there strapped down the sedative, pulling at my consciousness like a heavy tide. But my mind was sharp. I had the recording. I had the sample in my sock. And now, thanks to my brave little Zoe, I knew the weapon. Tonight, Victoria would squeeze the juice. She would stir in the double dose. She would hand it to my son with a smile. I had to get out of the asylum. I had to get back to that house. I had to smash that glass before it touched Tyrone's lips. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, but I did not sleep. I plotted. I counted the turns the ambulance made. I listened to the paramedics talking. I prepared. Victoria thought she had discarded a broken piece of machinery. She was about to find out that this machine was built for war, and I was coming for her. The smell of Sunny Hill Asylum was a mixture of industrial bleach, boiled cabbage, and human despair. It was not a hospital. It was a holding pen for the forgotten. My room was a 6x8 cell with padded walls that had turned a sickly yellow with age. There was no window, only a small reinforced grate near the ceiling that let in a sliver of gray light. They had taken my belt, my shoelaces, and my jacket, but they had not taken my glasses. That was their mistake. I sat on the thin mattress, my back against the wall, listening to the screams echoing down the hallway. Some were real screams of mental anguish, but others were screams of protest of sane people realizing they had been buried alive. I knew I had to be careful. I knew the routine. Every 4 hours, a nurse with dead eyes would come to the heavy steel door. She would slide open a small slot and hand me a paper cup with 2 blue pills. "Swallow," she would say. Her voice was robotic. She did not care if I lived or died as long as I was quiet. I played the part of the confused old man perfectly. I let my hand tremble as I took the cup. I spilled a little water on my chin. I placed the pills in my mouth, making a show of swallowing hard. I opened my mouth to show her my empty tongue. She grunted and slid the slot shut. As soon as her footsteps faded, I spat the pills into my hand. They were already starting to dissolve, bitter and chalky. I shoved them deep into the seam of the mattress where the stitching had come loose. I could not be sedated. Not tonight. Tonight was the timeline. Tonight was the orange juice. I needed a way out. The door was solid steel with a magnetic lock. I could not pick it. The ventilation grate in the ceiling was my only option. It was held in place by 4 Phillips head screws, standard issue, not security screws. They were arrogant. They assumed the people in here were too medicated to look up, let alone climb. I took off my glasses. They were wire-frame, strong titanium alloy. I had bought them specifically for their durability. I popped the left lens out and set it on the bed. Then I broke the arm off the hinge. It took some force, but the metal snapped cleanly. Now I had a thin metal rod, but the tip was blunt. I needed a flathead or a cross point. I crawled to the corner of the room where the padding had peeled away, revealing the rough concrete wall underneath. I began to grind the tip of the glass's arm against the concrete. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. I had to be quiet. I timed my scrapes with the screams from the hallway or the hum of the air conditioning system. My fingers ached. The metal grew hot from the friction, but slowly the blunt tip began to flatten and sharpen. I checked it against my thumbnail. It was crude, but it would provide enough torque to turn a screw if I applied enough pressure. I stood on the bed. It was wobbly, the springs groaning under my weight. I reached up. I was still 6 inches short of the grate. I needed leverage. I rolled the mattress up and stood on the edge of the bed frame, balancing precariously. My muscles screamed in protest. I was 68 years old, not 20. But the image of Tyrone drinking that juice fueled me. I fitted my makeshift tool into the first screw. It slipped. I cursed silently. I tried again, pressing upward with all my strength. The metal bit into the screw head. I turned. A quarter turn, half a turn. The paint cracked and the screw gave way. 1 down, 3 to go. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes. I worked feverishly. 2nd screw, 3rd screw. My tool was starting to bend. The metal was fatiguing. I was working on the final screw when the lock on the main door beeped. I froze. It was not time for meds. It had only been 2 hours. I jumped down from the bed, shoving the mattress back into place. I threw my glasses on the bed and sat down, trying to look lethargic. I hid the metal tool in my sleeve. The heavy door swung open. It wasn't the nurse. It was an orderly. He was a giant of a man, easily 6'4", with a neck as thick as a tree trunk. His name tag read Brutus, which I assumed was a nickname he had earned and enjoyed. He smelled of stale tobacco and cruelty. He walked into the room, scanning the corners. He wasn't bringing medicine. He was doing a contraband check. "Get up, old man," Brutus grunted. "Bed check." I stood up slowly, feigning weakness. My legs trembled, partly from the act, partly from the exertion of the climb. Brutus ripped the sheets off the bed. He flipped the pillow. Then he grabbed the mattress and hauled it up. A small cascade of blue pills fell out of the seam and scattered across the floor. Brutus stared at them. Then he turned to me. A vein in his forehead pulsed. "You think you are smart, huh?" he growled. "You think you can fool us." He took a step toward me, his fists clenched. He wasn't going to report me. He was going to punish me. He raised a hand the size of a shovel, ready to backhand me across the face. "So you want to play rough, Grandpa? Let me teach you some manners." He swung. It was a wide, undisciplined haymaker aimed at my head. Time seemed to slow down. I didn't see a giant orderly. I saw a target. I saw physics, force, momentum, and leverage. I didn't cower. I didn't flinch. I stepped inside his guard. My movement was fluid, efficient. I blocked his forearm with my left arm, deflecting the blow upward. At the same time, I drove the heel of my right hand into his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a wheezing whoosh. He doubled over, his eyes bulging. I didn't stop. I grabbed his collar with my left hand and swept his right leg with my foot. I used his own weight against him. He was top-heavy. He went down like a falling tower. He hit the floor with a bone-rattling thud. The breath was completely knocked out of him. Before he could inhale, I dropped my knee onto his carotid artery. Not enough to kill, but enough to shut the lights out. 3 seconds. That was all it took. He went limp. His eyes rolled back. I stood up and adjusted my shirt. My heart was beating steady and strong. I looked down at him. "You should have checked my file, son," I whispered. Logistics does not just mean counting boxes. I didn't have time to celebrate. I searched his pockets. I found a master key card. I debated using the door, but the hallway had cameras. The vent was still my best option for a covert exit. I dragged his heavy body onto the bed and covered him with the sheet. I turned him toward the wall so if anyone looked through the slot, they would just see a sleeping figure. I climbed back up to the grate. With the fourth screw removed, the metal grill came loose. I slid it aside. The shaft was dark and narrow, smelling of dust and mold. I pulled myself up. My shoulders burned. I scraped my elbows on the galvanized steel. I wiggled my hips through the opening and dragged my legs up after me. I slid the grate back into place as best I could. I was in. The tunnel was barely wider than my shoulders. I crawled on my belly, the metal screws snagging my clothes. It was suffocating. The darkness was absolute. I counted the turns in my head, trying to map the building from memory of the fire escape plan I had glanced at in the hallway earlier. I crawled for what felt like miles. Rats skittered away from me in the dark. I ignored them. I had bigger vermin to deal with. Finally, I saw a grate with light filtering through. I peered down. It was a laundry room. Industrial washers were humming. It was empty. I kicked the grate open. It clattered to the floor. I dropped down, landing in a pile of dirty linens. I stripped off my hospital gown. I found a maintenance uniform hanging on a rack. It was too big, but it was better than the gown. I put it on. I found a pair of work boots by the door. I walked out of the laundry room and into the service corridor. I kept my head down. I used the key card to open the rear exit. The night air hit my face. It was cold and crisp. I was free. I checked my watch. It was 7 p.m. Victoria would be making the juice soon. I didn't run to the house. That is what a panicked man would do. If I went to the house, the police would be called. Evans would have alerted them by now that I was missing. They would be waiting for me. They would paint me as an escaped lunatic. I needed backup. I needed firepower, not guns, but the kind of power that makes judges tremble. I ran toward the main road. I flagged down a taxi. I didn't have cash, but I had the platinum watch Althea gave me for our 40th anniversary. I unclasped it. "Take me to downtown," I told the driver, handing him the watch. "Get me to the law offices of Paris and Associates. Drive like the devil is chasing us." Because he is. The driver looked at the expensive watch, then at me in my stolen maintenance uniform. He didn't ask questions. He floored it. As the city lights blurred past the window, I closed my eyes and pictured the layout of my own home. I pictured the secret passage I had built under the wine cellar 30 years ago. Victoria didn't know about it. Tyrone had forgotten it. I wasn't going to knock on the front door. I was going to come up from the ground like a ghost. But first, I needed Paris. I needed him to see the Digitalist. I needed him to hear the recording. I needed him to know who Rebecca really was. The taxi screeched to a halt in front of a glass skyscraper. I jumped out before it fully stopped. I ran into the lobby. The security guard tried to stop me. "Call Paris," I shouted, slamming my hand on the desk. "Tell him Winston Carter is here. Tell him I have the proof." The guard hesitated, his hand on his taser. But something in my eyes must have stopped him. I didn't look crazy. I looked like a man on a mission. He picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Paris stood there. He was a small man in a sharp suit, but he had the heart of a lion. He looked at me covered in dust, wearing a janitor's uniform, bleeding from my elbows. "Winston," he said, his eyes widening. "What happened?" I walked into the elevator and hit the button for the top floor. "She tried to commit me, Paris," I said, my voice hard as stone. "She has the digitalis. She is going to kill Tyrone tonight." Paris's face hardened. He didn't ask if I was sure. He knew me. "Do you have the sample?" he asked. I reached into my sock and pulled out the plastic bottle. "Right here," I said. Paris nodded. He pulled out his phone. "I am calling the FBI. We are going to get a warrant." "No time for a warrant," I said as the elevator rose. "By the time you get a judge, my son will be dead. You get the feds. You get the background check on Rebecca. You get the cavalry ready. And you," Paris asked, "where are you going?" I checked the time. 7:30. "I am going home," I said. "I have a glass of orange juice to spill." The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime revealing the plush, carpeted expanse of Paris and Associates. Paris led me straight to his corner office, bypassing the curious stares of the late-night paralegals. I looked like a wreck in my oversized maintenance uniform, but Paris walked beside me as if I were a king. He closed the heavy mahogany door and locked it. The room smelled of old books and expensive scotch, a stark contrast to the antiseptic stench of the asylum I had just escaped. I sat in one of the leather chairs and wasted no time. I bent down and fished the plastic pill bottle from my sock. I placed it on his pristine glass desk. The white powder inside looked harmless, like sugar or salt, but we both knew it was death in a bottle. "That is it," I said, my voice raspy. "That is the digitalis. She keeps it under the boat in the garage." Paris stared at the bottle, his face grim. He didn't touch it. He pulled a pair of latex gloves from a drawer and carefully placed the bottle into an evidence bag. "And the recording?" he asked. I ripped the button off my shirt. I used my thumbnail to pry open the plastic casing and popped out the tiny memory chip. Paris inserted it into a reader connected to his computer. We listened in silence. The audio was crystal clear. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "Increase it. Don't wait 3 days. Finish it. Give him a double dose tonight." Paris's jaw tightened. He stopped the recording. He swiveled his chair around and looked out the window at the city lights. He took a deep breath, the kind a man takes before he delivers news that will destroy a world. "Winston," he said, turning back to me, "I did not just wait for you to bring me this. After you called me last night, I started digging. I have a friend at the bureau. We ran a facial recognition search on Victoria Carter." He opened a file folder on his desk and slid a photograph toward me. It was a mugshot. The woman in the picture was younger. Her hair was dark brown instead of blonde, but the eyes were the same, ice blue. "Dead. Her name is not Victoria," Paris said softly. "It is Rebecca Thorne." I stared at the photo. "The woman who slept down the hall from me. The mother of my granddaughter. She has been busy." Winston Paris continued, his voice heavy with the weight of the facts. "Before she came to Maryland, she lived in Texas. She was married to a cattle rancher named Jim. Jim died of a sudden heart attack 6 months after the wedding. He left her $2 million. My stomach churned. 2 years later, Paris went on, sliding another photo across the desk. She was in Florida. Blonde hair this time. Married to a retired real estate developer named Carl. Carl died in his sleep. Heart failure, $3 million. And then Ohio Paris said, dropping the final photo. An oil executive. Massive coronary, $4 million. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. It wasn't just Althea. It wasn't just Tyrone. She was a professional. She was a black widow who moved from state to state, leaving a trail of bodies and emptied bank accounts. "She is not just a killer," Paris said. "She is a ghost. She changes her name, her hair, her history. But she always keeps the method. Poison, patience, profit." I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "She is going to kill him tonight, Paris," I said. "I heard her. She said she is giving him a double dose. She is not waiting." Paris nodded. "I know. I am calling my contact at the FBI right now. We have the digitalis, we have the recording, we have her identity. We have enough to bury her." He picked up his phone and started dialing. I watched him. I thought about federal bureaucracy. I thought about warrants. I thought about judges sleeping in their beds who needed to be woken up to sign papers. "How long?" I asked. "How long until they get to my house?" Paris paused the phone to his ear. "Winston, these things take time. We have to follow procedure. If we go in without a warrant, she walks. We need a tactical team. Maybe 2 hours, maybe 3. 2 hours. Tyrone drank his juice at 8. It was already almost 8 o'clock. If we wait 2 hours," I said, walking toward the door, "we will be collecting a body, not saving a life." Paris slammed the phone down. "Winston, stop. You cannot go back there." I turned to face him. My friend looked scared. He looked at me like I was a dead man walking. "She thinks I am in a padded room, Paris. She thinks she won. That is my advantage." "You are an escaped mental patient in the eyes of the law right now," Paris argued, coming around the desk. "If the police see you, they will shoot you. If she sees you, she will shoot you. She probably has a gun, Winston. She killed 3 husbands. Do you think she won't put a bullet in an old man? I don't care," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like the voice of the man I used to be in the service. "He is my son, Paris. I know he is weak. I know he let her push me out. I know he is foolish. But he is my blood. I held him when he was a baby. I promised Althea I would protect him. I am not going to let that monster stop his heart while we wait for a judge to sign a piece of paper." Paris looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He knew he couldn't stop me. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a set of keys. "Take my car," he said. "It is the black sedan in the private lot. B12. It is faster than a taxi." I took the keys. "Thank you. I will get the FBI moving," Paris said. "I will tell them you are a cooperating witness, not a fugitive. But Winston promised me one thing." "What? Don't die," he said. "I don't want to represent your estate. I want to represent you." I nodded. I turned and ran for the elevator. As I drove Paris's car through the night, weaving through traffic, I formulated my plan. I couldn't go in through the front door. Victoria would have the chain on. She might have an alarm set now that she was paranoid. And if I kicked the door down, she would hear me. She would have time to pour the juice down the sink. She would have time to act the victim again. I needed to be a ghost, just like her. I thought about the house. I knew every inch of it. I bought it 30 years ago as a fixer-upper. I had renovated it from the foundation up. There was a way in, a way she didn't know about. When I renovated the basement, I found an old coal chute that had been bricked up. Instead of sealing it permanently, I had converted it. I was worried about the Cold War back then, worried about security. I built a hidden access tunnel that led from the old storm drain in the ravine behind the property directly into the wine cellar. It was tight, it was dirty, and I hadn't opened the hatch in 20 years, but it was my only shot. Victoria never went into the wine cellar. She said it was damp and smelled like mold. She didn't know that behind the rack of vintage Bordeaux, there was a false panel. I parked the car 2 streets away. I didn't want her to see headlights. I killed the engine and sat in the dark for a moment. I checked my pockets. I had the recording chip. I didn't have a weapon. I was walking into a house with a serial killer armed only with the element of surprise and an old man's rage. That would have to be enough. I got out of the car and moved into the shadows. I cut through the neighbor's yard, moving silently through the hedges. I reached the ravine behind my house. Ideally, I would have had a flashlight, but I knew the way by feel. I found the heavy iron grate of the storm drain. I pulled. It groaned, rusted, and stubborn. I grit my teeth and put my back into it. It gave way with a screech of metal on stone. I froze, waiting for lights to flip on in the house above. Nothing. I slipped inside. The tunnel smelled of wet earth and decay. I crawled on my hands and knees. It was tighter than I remembered. Or maybe I was just bigger. I reached the end of the tunnel. I felt for the latch of the hidden door. It was stiff. I pushed. I shoved with my shoulder. It popped open. I tumbled out onto the cool brick floor of the wine cellar. I lay there for a second listening. Silence. I stood up and brushed the dirt off my uniform. I pushed the wine rack back into place. I crept up the cellar stairs. I cracked the door open. I was in the pantry just off the kitchen. I could hear them. I heard the clinking of a spoon against glass. "Here you go, honey." Victoria's voice drifted in. "Drink it all. It will help you sleep." "No," Tyrone groaned. "It tastes bitter, Vic. I don't want it." "Don't be a baby," she scolded gently. "It is the medicine. It has to taste bad to work. Drink it, for me." I pushed the pantry door open. I stepped into the kitchen. Victoria was standing with her back to me, holding the glass to Tyrone's lips. Tyrone was sitting in his chair, weak and pale, trying to turn his head away. She was tilting the glass. The orange liquid was touching his lips. I didn't yell. I didn't announce myself. I picked up the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove, and I charged. The tires of Paris's car crunched softly against the asphalt as I parked 2 blocks away from my own home. I killed the engine and sat in the darkness for a moment, listening to the silence of the suburban street. It was a silence that masked a deadly secret. My hands were steady, steadier than they had been in years. The tremors Victoria claimed were Parkinson's had vanished, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a man on a mission. I was not Winston the retired mechanic tonight. I was not the confused old grandfather. I was a soldier returning to the battlefield, and the enemy was sleeping in my master bedroom. I stepped out of the car and into the cool night air. I did not walk toward the front door. That would be suicide. Victoria would have the chain on the alarm set and a weapon within reach. She was expecting a ghost, or perhaps the police, but she was not expecting me to come from beneath the earth. I moved through the shadows of the neighbors' hedges, my boots sinking into the damp soil. I knew every inch of this neighborhood. I knew which floorboards creaked in Mrs. Higgins' house and which dogs barked at shadows. I moved like smoke until I reached the ravine behind my property. The entrance to the old storm drain was overgrown with kudzu and brambles. I pulled the vines away, ignoring the thorns that tore at my maintenance uniform. The heavy iron grate groaned in protest. As I pulled it open, the rusted hinges shrieking like a dying animal. I froze, waiting for lights to flick on in the house above. Nothing. The house remained dark and silent, a tomb waiting for its final occupant. I slipped inside the concrete tunnel and pulled the grate shut behind me. The air inside was stale and smelled of wet earth decay and old secrets. I clicked on the small flashlight I had taken from Paris's office. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the slick, mossy walls. I had built the secret access tunnel 30 years ago during the height of the Cold War panic. I was a young father, then terrified of a world that seemed on the brink of destruction. I wanted a way out for my family, a bolt hole. I never imagined I would use it to break back in to save them from one of our own. I crawled on my hands and knees. The tunnel was tighter than I remembered. My shoulders scraped against the rough concrete. My breath echoed loudly in the confined space. I crawled for what felt like miles, counting the seams in the pipe, measuring the distance in my head. I reached the junction where the storm drain met the old coal chute I had converted. It was bricked up on the outside, invisible to the naked eye, but from the inside there was a steel hatch. I reached up and found the wheel. It was cold and rusted. I gripped it with both hands and turned. It refused to budge. I gritted my teeth and put my back into it, driving upward with my legs. With a sharp crack of breaking rust, the wheel turned. The hatch swung open, showering me with dust and cobwebs. I pulled myself up into the narrow crawl space beneath the wine cellar. I was in. I was under the floorboards of my own home. I didn't go up into the cellar immediately. I had one stop to make first. In the corner of the crawl space, tucked behind a structural support beam, was a metal lockbox. I had welded it there myself. I dragged it out, the metal scraping softly against the dirt. I keyed in the code. It was Althea's birthday. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in an oilcloth, was my service pistol, an M1911. It was heavy, cold, and lethal. Beside it sat 2 magazines of ammunition. I unwrapped the gun. I checked the action. It slid back smoothly, the oil having preserved it perfectly all these years. I loaded a magazine and racked the slide. The sound was the most reassuring thing I had heard all day. I tucked the gun into the waistband of my trousers and moved toward the ventilation shaft. I had designed the HVAC system myself. The main intake vent ran directly under the living room floor. It was large enough for a man to crawl through if he was desperate enough. I removed the service panel and shimmied inside the metal ductwork. I moved slowly, inch by inch, terrified that the metal would pop or creak and give me away. I reached the floor register that looked up into the living room. Through the slats of the grill, I could see them. The living room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Tyrone was slumped on the sofa. He looked terrible. His skin was the color of old ash, and his head lolled to the side as if his neck could no longer support its weight. He was sweating profusely, his shirt clinging to his gaunt frame. He looked like a man who had already 1 foot in the grave. Victoria stood over him. She was holding a clipboard and a pen. She looked immaculate, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She did not look like a woman whose husband was dying. She looked like a woman closing a business deal. "Sign it, Ty," she said. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried an undercurrent of steel. "Just sign the paper, and you can rest." Tyrone blinked slowly, trying to focus on the document she held in front of his face. He lifted a trembling hand and pushed the clipboard away weakly. I cannot," he wheezed. His voice was a dry rattle. I need to read it." "You do not need to read it, baby," Victoria cooed. She pushed the clipboard back into his chest. "It is just the medical power of attorney we talked about. It lets me make decisions for you so the doctors can help you. You want the doctors to help you, don't you?" She was lying. I could see the header of the document from my vantage point. It was in bold black letters. Last will and testament. She was trying to get him to sign everything over to her before the final dose stopped his heart. "I am so tired," Vic Tyrone whispered. His eyes fluttered closed. "I know," she said. "I know you are tired. That is why you need to sign. Once you sign, I will give you your medicine. I will give you the juice. It will make the pain go away. It will make everything go away." She held the pen out to him. She wrapped his limp fingers around it. She guided his hand toward the signature line. "Just right here," she whispered. Do it for me. Do it for Zoe. At the mention of her name, a sound erupted from the hallway that made my blood run cold. It was a scream. A child's scream. Dad, do not sign it. It was Zoe. She was locked in her bedroom down the hall, but she must have been listening at the door. She must have heard everything. Victoria's head snapped up. Her face contorted into a mask of pure fury. She dropped the sweet, caring wife act in an instant. "Shut up!" she shrieked toward the hallway. "Dad." "She is lying," Zoe screamed again. She pounded on her bedroom door. The sound of her small fists hitting the wood echoed through the house. "It is not for the doctor. It is a will Grandpa told me." Victoria threw the clipboard onto the coffee table. She marched toward the hallway. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor, sounding like gunshots. I shifted my position, trying to get a better view. I saw her stop at Zoe's door. It was locked from the outside with a heavy slide bolt Victoria must have installed recently. "Open this door, Zoe!" Victoria yelled. "You are being a very bad girl." "No," Zoe shouted back. "I won't let you hurt him." Victoria unlocked the bolt and threw the door open. She didn't go in. She stood in the doorway blocking the exit. I couldn't see Zoe, but I could hear her scrambling backward. "You think you are so smart, don't you?" Victoria hissed. "You think because you and that senile old man have secrets, you can stop me." "He is gone, Zoe. He is locked away in a padded room, and he is never coming back. And your father is going to die tonight. And you are going to be an orphan, and I will be the only one left to take care of you. Do you know what happens to orphans who don't behave?" "You are a witch," Zoe yelled. Victoria's hand lashed out. I saw the motion through the sliver of the open door. It was fast and violent. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the house. Zoe cried out in pain. It wasn't a cry of fear anymore. It was a cry of physical hurt. Victoria slammed the door shut and slid the bolt back into place. "That will teach you to keep your mouth shut." She spat at the closed door. I watched from beneath the floorboards, my vision blurring with red rage. My teeth ground together so hard I felt a molar crack. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. My hand gripped the handle of the pistol until my knuckles turned white. She had hit my granddaughter. She had struck the innocent child I swore to protect. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to burst through the floor right now, to put a bullet in her and end this nightmare. But I forced myself to wait. I forced the soldier to take command over the grandfather. If I shot her now, Tyrone might still die. I didn't know where the antidote was or if there even was one. I needed her to confess. I needed her to think she had won so she would let her guard down completely. Victoria walked back into the living room. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She smoothed her hair and composed her face before turning back to Tyrone. "She is hysterical," Victoria said to my son, her voice returning to that sickeningly sweet tone. "She is just upset about Winston. Ignore her, Ty. Focus on me." Tyrone looked at her. For the first time in months, there was a spark of clarity in his eyes. The scream of his daughter had pierced through the fog of the poison. You hit her," Tyrone rasped. He tried to sit up, but his arms collapsed under him. "I did not hit her." Victoria lied effortlessly. "She tripped. She is clumsy, just like your father. Now sign the paper." "Tyrone, I am losing my patience. I am not." Signing, Tyrone whispered. Victoria stared at him. The mask fell away completely. She picked up the glass of orange juice from the side table. The liquid was thick and pulpy. I knew what was in it. A double dose. A lethal dose. She held the glass in front of his face. "You don't want to sign fine? Then you can drink this first. You will sign it eventually. You will sign it when the pain gets so bad you would sell your soul for relief." She pressed the glass against his lips. "Drink it," she commanded. Tyrone clamped his mouth shut. He turned his head away. "Drink it," she screamed. She grabbed his jaw with her free hand and forced his face toward her. She tried to pry his mouth open with her fingers. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't watch my son be murdered in his own living room. I holstered the gun. I reached up and unlocked the latches on the floor register. I pushed the metal grill up. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. Victoria spun around, dropping the glass. It shattered, splattering orange juice and poison across the expensive rug. "What the hell?" she screeched. I placed my hands on the edge of the opening and pulled. I erupted from the floor like a demon rising from hell. I was covered in dirt, sweat, and cobwebs. I stood up, towering over the room, the M1911 in my hand leveled directly at her chest. "Hello, Rebecca," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I believe you dropped something." The living room of my home had been transformed into a macabre stage for a celebration that should not have been happening. I watched from the shadows of the hallway, peering through the crack in the door I had just opened. Victoria had invited people over. There were about 10 of them. I recognized Dr. Evans holding a glass of scotch and laughing a little too loudly. There was a man I didn't know, likely the lawyer drafting the fake will. And there were a few women who looked like expensive vultures draped in jewelry that probably belonged to dead wives of previous victims. The room was lit by soft, tasteful lamps and candles. Soft jazz played from the smart speakers I had wired into the ceiling 5 years ago. On the coffee table there were trays of hors d'oeuvres and bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly pension. Victoria stood in the center of the room. She was wearing a black cocktail dress that was appropriate for morning but cut low enough to suggest she was ready for her next chapter. She held a glass of red wine, her face flushed with excitement, not grief. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she said, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Oscar. "It means so much to me to have support. Tyrone is... well, he is fading fast." A murmur of sympathetic noises went around the room. "He is upstairs resting," she continued, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "The doctor says his heart just cannot take much more. He likely won't make it through the night. It is a tragedy. He is so young." To anyone else she looked like a devastated wife preparing for the worst. But I saw the truth. I saw the way she caught Evan's eye and smirked behind her wine glass. I saw the way she touched the diamond necklace at her throat, a nervous tick of anticipation. This wasn't a vigil. It was a victory lap. She was celebrating the payday before the check had even cleared. Upstairs, my son was dying, his body shutting down from the poison she had fed him. And down here she was toasting to his death with the people who helped her orchestrate it. The rage inside me was cold and precise. It was not a fire that burned out of control. It was a laser focused entirely on the woman in the black dress. I slipped back into the shadows and made my way to the utility closet in the mudroom. This was the nerve center of the house. The breaker panel was here along with the main hub for the smart home system. I had built this system. I knew its codes. I knew its back doors. Victoria used it to play jazz and dim the lights. I was going to use it to bring her world crashing down. I opened the panel. I didn't just want to cut the lights. I wanted to control the environment. I wanted to turn her sanctuary into a haunted house. First, I pulled the main breaker lever down hard. The house plunged into absolute darkness. The jazz music cut off instantly. The hum of the refrigerator died. The only light came from the few candles flickering in the living room, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. Screams erupted from the living room. Glasses shattered as people bumped into furniture. "What happened?" someone shouted. "It is just a power outage." Victoria's voice cut through the panic, sharp and annoyed. "Everyone stay calm. I will get the flashlights." She was trying to maintain control. She didn't know that control had just left her hands and entered mine. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small maintenance tablet I used to service the home network. It was old, but it still connected to the local battery backup I had installed for the security system. The smart speakers had their own backup power. They were active. I tapped the screen. I accessed the audio files, not music playlists. I accessed the file I had uploaded from the recording chip earlier. I set the volume to maximum. Every speaker in the house, from the living room to the master bedroom, was about to broadcast the truth. I hit play. The silence of the dark house was shattered by a voice. It was distorted slightly by the amplification, booming and godlike but unmistakable. "Increase it. Do not wait 3 days. Finish it. Give him a double dose tonight." The voice echoed off the walls. It reverberated through the floorboards. It was Victoria's voice, cold, calculating, murderous. In the living room, the gasps were audible. "What was that?" a woman shrieked. Victoria Evans's voice sounded tight with fear. Then another voice boomed from the speakers. It was Evans himself. "We need this done, Vic. I have investors waiting. I need my share of that 5 million. The audio clip looped. "Give him a double dose tonight. Double dose tonight. Double dose." I could hear the chaos escalating in the living room. People were scrambling. Someone knocked over a chair. "Turn it off!" Victoria screamed. Her voice was shrill, bordering on hysteria. "Who is doing that?" "Turn it off." I didn't turn it off. I switched tracks. I played the recording of her talking to Zoe. "You are going to be an orphan, and I will be the only one left to take care of you. Do you know what happens to orphans who don't behave?" The menace in her voice filled the house. It was the sound of a monster unmasked. I stood in the utility closet watching the tablet screen. I could see the audio waveforms spiking. I imagined their faces, the socialites, the lawyers, the accomplices. They were standing in the dark, listening to their hostess confess to conspiracy and child abuse. I waited until the panic reached a fever pitch. I waited until I heard them trying to find the door, stumbling over each other in the dark. Then I reached for the breaker panel again. I flipped the main switch back on. The lights flooded the house with blinding intensity. The sudden brightness was disorienting, like a flashbang going off. I stepped out of the mudroom and walked down the hallway. I didn't rush. My boots fell heavy on the floor. Thud, thud, thud. I entered the living room. The scene was one of frozen terror. The guests were huddled near the walls, shielding their eyes from the sudden light. Dr. Evans was pale sweat beading on his forehead, looking for an exit that didn't exist. And in the center of the room stood Victoria. She was clutching a candlestick as a weapon, her chest heaving, her eyes wild and darting around the room. She looked like a trapped animal. She saw me. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at my dirty maintenance uniform covered in cobwebs and earth. She looked at the smudges of grease on my face. She looked at the M1911 pistol in my hand. To her, I must have looked like a dead man walking, a ghost risen from the grave to drag her down to hell. I raised the gun. I didn't aim it at her head. I aimed at center mass. My hand was rock steady. The room went deathly silent. Even the guests stopped breathing. They stared at the old man they thought was senile, the man they thought was locked away in an asylum. They saw the steel in my eyes and the gun in my hand, and they knew that the game was over. Victoria took a step back. She dropped the candlestick. It clattered on the hardwood floor. "Winston," she whispered, you are supposed to be..." In a padded room, I finished for her. My voice was low, gravelly, and it carried to every corner of the room. "Sorry to disappoint you, Rebecca, but I checked myself out." She flinched at the use of her real name. The color drained from her face completely. "You heard the recording I said to the room at large, keeping my eyes locked on hers. You all heard it. That is the voice of a woman planning to murder her husband." "My son, he is lying," Victoria shrieked, finding her voice again. "He is crazy. He escaped from the mental hospital. He has a gun. Call the police." Nobody moved. Nobody reached for a phone. They were paralyzed by the reality of what they had just heard and what they were now seeing. I took a step forward. Victoria stumbled back, hitting the coffee table. "Where is the antidote, Victoria?" I asked. "I do not know what you are talking about," she yelled. "You are insane." I cocked the hammer of the pistol. The click was loud and final. "The digitalis," I said. "You have the poison. You must have something to counteract it in case you accidentally dosed yourself." "Where is it?" She stared at the gun. She looked at Evans. "Help me," she screamed at him. "Do something." Evans held up his hands, backing away. I don't know anything about this. I was just invited for drinks." Coward, I thought. I looked back at Victoria. "The party is over, daughter-in-law," I said. Suddenly a groan came from the top of the stairs. We all looked up. Tyrone was standing on the landing. He was leaning against the railing, his face ashen, clutching his chest. He looked like a corpse that had refused to lie down. "Dad," he rasped. His voice was weak, barely a whisper. What is happening?" Victoria's eyes lit up. She saw an opportunity. She saw a shield. "Tyrone," she screamed, "help me. Your father has a gun. He is going to kill us all." "He has finally snapped." She ran toward the stairs. She ran toward my dying son, not to save him, but to put him between her and the bullet. I tracked her with the pistol. I could have dropped her. I could have put a round in her leg before she took 3 steps. But Tyrone was right there. If I missed, if the bullet passed through her. I lowered the gun slightly. "Get away from him," I roared. But she was already there. She grabbed Tyrone's arm, pulling him down to her level, using his weak body as a human shield. She peeked over his shoulder, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Shoot me, old man," she taunted. "Shoot me and you shoot your son." The guests were screaming now, scrambling for the front door. I ignored them. My world had narrowed down to the woman hiding behind my son and the gun in my hand. I had to end this, but I couldn't shoot. Not with Tyrone there, I needed another way. I looked at Tyrone. He was confused in pain and dying, but he was looking at me. He was looking at the gun. Son, I said, my voice breaking. She poisoned you. The orange juice. It is digitalis. She is killing you for the insurance money, liar, Victoria hissed in his ear. He is crazy, Ty. Look at him. He broke out of the asylum. Tyrone looked at me. Then he looked at Victoria. He looked at the fear in her eyes, the desperation. And then he looked at the glass of orange juice that had shattered on the floor earlier. He remembered. He remembered me knocking the glass away. He remembered Zoe screaming. A flicker of realization crossed his face. I don't believe you, Dad, he whispered. My heart shattered. Even now, even with a gun in my hand and the truth screaming from the speakers, he couldn't accept it. The poison in his mind was stronger than the poison in his blood. Victoria smiled. She thought she had won, but she forgot one thing. She forgot that I wasn't alone in this house. From the hallway behind the kitchen, a small figure appeared. She was holding a tattered doll in one hand. It was Zoe. She walked into the living room. She didn't look at the guests running out the door. She didn't look at the gun. She looked straight at her father. Daddy, she said, her voice small but clear in the sudden silence. She lifted the doll. I have the pictures, Daddy, the ones on the little card. I saw Mommy put the powder in your cup. Victoria froze. Zoe reached into the back of the doll and pulled out a small SD card. It was from the toy camera I had given her last Christmas. The camera Victoria thought was broken. I recorded it, Zoe said. Like Grandpa said. Victoria released Tyrone and lunged for Zoe. Give me that, she shrieked. That was the mistake. She moved away from the shield. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think. I raised the M1911 and fired. The shot rang out deafeningly in the confined space of the living room. I didn't aim for Victoria. I aimed for the chandelier above her head. The crystal fixture exploded, raining shards of glass down between her and Zoe. It was a warning shot, a calculated risk to break her focus and separate her from the child. Victoria screamed and ducked, covering her head. Zoe took the opportunity to scramble backward, clutching the doll to her chest, her eyes wide with terror but her resolve unshaken. I stepped forward, the gun still raised smoke drifting from the barrel. The room smelled of gunpowder and expensive perfume. It is over, Victoria, I growled. Step away from my son. Step away from my granddaughter. But Victoria wasn't done. She looked up from the floor glass glittering in her hair, and her face twisted into a mask of pure manufactured victimhood. She looked past me toward the open front door where the sirens were getting louder. She looked at Tyrone, who was slumped against the wall, clutching his chest, his breathing ragged. Help me, she screamed, her voice piercing and hysterical. Please, someone, help! He has a gun. My father-in-law has escaped the asylum, and he is trying to kill us all. She crawled toward Tyrone, ignoring the glass cutting into her knees. She grabbed his hand, her tears flowing instantly. Oh, God. Ty, look at him. He tried to shoot me. He tried to shoot Zoe. He is having a psychotic break. I lowered the gun, slightly looking at my son. Tyrone, listen to me. She is lying. The recording, the poison, it is all her. Tyrone looked up. His eyes were glassy, filled with pain and confusion. The digitalis was shutting down his system, making it hard to think, hard to see. But he saw his wife, the woman he loved, cowering on the floor. He saw his father covered in dirt and grease, holding a smoking gun. He didn't see a rescuer. He saw a nightmare. Dad, Tyrone wheezed, his voice barely audible over the approaching sirens. Put it down, please, son. I pleaded, taking a step closer. She is killing you. The orange juice. Remember the taste. Remember how sick you felt after drinking it. No. Tyrone gasped. He tried to push himself up, placing his body between me and Victoria. Don't hurt her. She loves me. She takes care of me. You need help, Dad. The words hit me harder than any bullet could. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I was risking my life and freedom to save, was choosing his killer over me. The poison had done its work, not just on his heart, but on his mind. She had spent months isolating him, whispering lies, rewriting reality until he couldn't trust his own father. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a cracking sensation that had nothing to do with age. It was the sound of a heart breaking. I had crawled through sewers for him. I had broken out of a padded cell for him. I was ready to go to prison for him. And he looked at me with fear and pity. Dad, please, Tyrone begged, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. Just stop. Go back to the hospital. Let Vic help you." Victoria looked up at me from behind Tyrone's shoulder. She wasn't crying anymore. A small, triumphant smirk played on her lips. It was a look of pure victory. She knew she had him. She knew that no matter what evidence I had, no matter what recordings played, Tyrone's love for her was the ultimate shield. I lowered the gun to my side. I didn't drop it, but I took my finger off the trigger. I looked at Tyrone, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the love he had for this woman. It was a blind, desperate love, the kind that ignores red flags and excuses monsters. I realized then that saving his life might mean losing his love forever, and I was willing to pay that price. "I am not going back to the hospital, Tyrone," I said softly. "And I am not going to let you die, even if you hate me for it." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She sensed the shift in my resolve. She opened her mouth to scream again, to escalate the chaos. Suddenly the front door burst open. "Police, drop the weapon. Drop it now." 3 officers stormed into the room, guns drawn, tactical lights blinding me. I didn't resist. I didn't try to explain. I knew how this looked. An armed black man in a wealthy suburban home holding a gun over a white woman and a dying man. I knew the script. I opened my hand. The M1911 clattered to the floor. I raised my hands slowly, keeping them visible. "I am unarmed," I said calmly. "Get on the ground. Now. Face down." I lowered myself to the floor. My knees ached, my old joints protesting. I lay flat on the hardwood, the smell of dust and floor wax filling my nose. A heavy boot pressed into my back. Hands grabbed my wrists and wrenched them behind me. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into my skin. "He is crazy," Victoria screamed, pointing at me. "He broke in. He has been threatening to kill us for days. He poisoned my husband." What I shouted into the floorboards. "She is lying. Check the juice. Check the recording." "Shut up," the officer on my back yelled. "You have the right to remain silent." Another officer moved to check on Tyrone. "He needs a medic. This man is in cardiac arrest." Victoria was sobbing again, clinging to the officer's arm. "Please, save him. His father did this. He switched his medication. He tried to kill him to get his insurance money." She was twisting the narrative in real time, using every lie she had planted over the last 6 months. She was blaming me for her crimes. And in the chaos with Tyrone dying and me in cuffs, it was working. They hauled me to my feet. I winced as my shoulders popped. I looked around the room. The guests were gone. Evans was gone. It was just the police, the paramedics rushing in to work on Tyrone and Victoria. Zoe was standing in the corner, clutching her doll. She looked terrified. An officer was trying to talk to her, but she just stared at me. "It is okay, Zoe," I called out. "Be brave. Keep the doll safe." "Get him out of here," the sergeant barked. They shoved me toward the door. As I passed Victoria, she looked up. Her eyes were dry. Her face was composed. She leaned in close, pretending to check if I was secure, but really she just wanted to whisper one last thing. She smiled. It was the smile of the devil himself. "Goodbye, Dad," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "Tyrone won't make it to the hospital, and you will die in prison knowing you failed." I stared at her. I didn't scream. I didn't struggle. I just looked at her with the cold, hard stare of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You missed something, Rebecca," I said. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. What I didn't answer. I let the officers drag me out the door and into the night air. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the neighborhood. Mrs. Higgins was watching from her porch. The whole street was watching. Winston Carter, the crazy old man, finally being taken away. They pushed me into the back of a squad car. The hard plastic seat was uncomfortable. I watched through the window as they loaded Tyrone onto a stretcher. They were doing chest compressions. Victoria was running alongside them, holding his hand, playing the grieving widow perfectly. I sat in the dark car, my hands numb in the cuffs. I closed my eyes and prayed, not for myself, for Tyrone. I prayed that his heart was stronger than her poison. I prayed that Zoe held on to that doll. Victoria thought she had won. She thought the game was over. She thought I was just an old mechanic who had played his last card. But she didn't know about Paris. She didn't know about the FBI. And she certainly didn't know what was buried under the boat. The squad car engine rumbled to life. As we pulled away, I looked back at my house, my home. It was a crime scene now, but it was also a trap. and Victoria was still inside it. Just wait, I thought. Just wait until they open the box. The car turned the corner and the house disappeared from view. I was alone in the back seat headed for a cell, but for the first time in days I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange cold calm. The soldier had done his job. He had drawn the enemy fire. He had exposed the position. Now it was time for the artillery. I looked at the officer driving the car. "You might want to turn around, son," I said quietly. "You are driving away from the real criminal." "Shut up back there," the officer said, not even looking in the mirror. I leaned my head back against the seat and waited. The night wasn't over yet, and neither was I. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as the officer shoved me forward. I stumbled but kept my footing, my eyes locked on Tyrone. He lay on the floor gasping for air, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. Victoria stood over him, not comforting him but watching me with cold, dead eyes. She mouthed the words, "Goodbye, Dad," a silent victory lap. She thought the script was written, the curtain falling on her perfect crime. But the play wasn't over. Blue and red lights suddenly flooded the front bay window, cutting through the gloom. Tires screeched against the asphalt of the driveway, followed by the heavy slam of car doors. "What is going on?" the sergeant asked, tightening his grip on my arm, confusion clouding his face. The front door, already hanging off its hinges, was kicked fully open. "Federal agents, nobody move." A team of men in windbreakers with FBI stenciled on the back stormed into the living room. They moved with a precision that made the local cops look like amateurs, their rifles raised, but aimed at the room, not me. Behind them walked a small man in an impeccable suit, holding a briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other. It was Paris. "Stop," Paris shouted. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded absolute silence. "Officer, release that man immediately." The sergeant looked from Paris to the FBI agents, his authority wavering. "Who are you?" "This man is a suspect in a breaking and entering and—" "This man," Paris interrupted, stepping into the center of the chaos, "is a federal whistleblower and a protected witness, and the person you should be arresting is standing right there." He pointed a finger straight at Victoria. Victoria gasped, clutching her chest in a performance of shock. I am the victim here. He tried to shoot me." Paris ignored her. He walked up to the sergeant and held up a document. "My client provided a sample of a substance found in this house 2 hours ago. The FBI lab fast-tracked the analysis." He paused, letting the tension build. "It is not a vitamin supplement, it is digoxin, pure concentrated digitalis, enough to kill a horse, let alone a man with a heart condition." The sergeant looked at the paper, then at Tyrone, who was still wheezing on the floor. "Get a medic on him now," he barked at one of his men. "And get that IV out of him." "That is a lie," Victoria shrieked, her voice cracking. "He planted it. He is trying to frame me." "Frame you?" Paris asked calmly. "Like you were framed in Texas, or Florida, or Ohio." He turned to the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. "Winston," Paris said to me, "if you would." I smiled, though still cuffed. I nodded at the smart hub. Paris tapped his tablet, overriding the system. The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a recording this time. It was a slideshow, high-resolution mugshots. The first photo showed a woman with brunette hair. Younger, but the eyes were the same. Rebecca Thorne, wanted for questioning. Death of spouse. The second photo showed a redhead, Rebecca Smith, suspect. Death of spouse. The third photo was Victoria, blonde, perfect. Victoria Carter. "Her name is Rebecca Thorne," Paris announced. "She is a black widow. She marries wealthy men, takes out insurance policies, and then their hearts just stop. 3 husbands, 3 heart attacks, 3 payouts. Tyrone Carter was supposed to be number 4. The room erupted. The officers looked at Victoria. The guests gasped. Victoria stared at the screen, her face contorting. The mask of the grieving beauty cracked and fell away, revealing the snarl of a cornered rat. "That is not me," she yelled. She looked at Tyrone. "Ty baby, do not listen to them. It is a deep fake. They are using AI. Your father is a security expert. He can make anything look real." Tyrone looked up, his eyes unfocused and swimming in pain. He looked at the screen, then at his wife. The poison was confusing him. He wanted to trust her. She was his world. It looks like you, Vic," Tyrone whispered. "It is a trick," she screamed, turning on the sergeant. "You are going to let them do this. You are going to let this crazy old man and his lawyer harass me in my own home while my husband is dying. Arrest them, do your job." She was good. I had to give her that. Even with her face on the screen, she fought with a ferocity that planted seeds of doubt. She needed doubt. Doubt would buy her time. Time would let Tyrone die. I felt the sergeant hesitate. He looked at the mugshots, then at the hysterical woman. It was a lot to process in 30 seconds. "Uncuff me," I said to the officer holding me. "Quiet," the officer said, but his grip loosened. "I said uncuff me," I repeated. "I have something that isn't digital. I have something she can't call a deepfake." Paris looked at me and nodded. "Sergeant," Paris said, "if you arrest him, you are arresting the only man who tried to save that victim. If she walks out of here, her next stop is a non-extradition country. Do you want that on your badge?" The sergeant looked at Victoria, who was inching toward the back door. "Hold her," he ordered. 2 officers stepped toward Victoria. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "Winston," Paris said. "What do you have?" I looked around the room. I needed Zoe. I needed the final nail in the coffin. "Zoe!" I shouted. My voice boomed, filling the house. "Zoe, honey, come out! Silence! Zoe, bring the doll! Bring Mr. Bear!" Victoria froze. Her eyes went wide. For the first time, she looked truly terrified. Not angry, not manipulative, scared. "She is not here!" Victoria yelled. "She ran away! You scared her off with the gun!" But then a small door creaked open. From the pantry, Zoe emerged. She was shaking, her face streaked with tears and dust, but in her arms she clutched a ragged old teddy bear. "Grandpa," she whispered. "Come here, baby," I said gently. "Bring it here." Zoe walked past her mother. Victoria lunged for her. "Zoe, go to your room," she shrieked, reaching out a clawed hand. "Hey!" An FBI agent stepped in, shoving Victoria back. "Stand down, ma'am." Zoe ran to me. The officer uncuffed one of my hands. I knelt down and hugged her. "Did you do it?" I whispered. "Did you record it?" She nodded against my shoulder. "Yes, Grandpa." The red light was on. I stood up and took the bear. On the back, hidden under the vest, was the lens of the toy camera I had modified. I pulled the SD card out. I handed it to Paris. "Play it. Play the last hour." Paris plugged it into his tablet and cast the video to the big screen. The image changed. It was a low-angle shot from the kitchen counter. It showed Victoria standing at the island. She wasn't crying. She was humming. She pulled out the glass vial, the same one from the garage. She poured half the white powder into a glass of orange juice. She stirred it, lifted the glass to the light, and smiled. "Drink up, Ty," the Victoria on the screen said to the empty room. Her face twisted into a smile of pure evil. $5 million. Mommy needs a new life. She laughed. A cold, soulless sound. The video ended. The silence in the room was absolute. Every eye turned to Victoria. There were no more excuses, no more lies. We had all watched her pour the poison. Tyrone was staring at the screen, weeping silently. The truth had finally pierced his heart. "Vic," he whispered. "Why?" Victoria looked at him. She looked at the police closing in. She looked at me. And then she smiled. It was the smile of the devil deciding to burn the board. "Because you are boring, Ty," she spat. "You are weak, and you are worth more dead than you ever were alive." She reached into her dress. "Gun!" the sergeant screamed. But it wasn't a gun. It was a knife. She spun around and grabbed Zoe. "Back off!" she screamed, holding the knife to her own daughter's throat. "Back off, or I swear to God I will cut her." The room vibrated with the tension of a drawn bowstring. Victoria stood near the fireplace, her chest heaving, her eyes darting between the FBI agents and the sergeant. She was cornered, but she was not defeated. She had planted seeds of doubt, and she was watering them with every scream of denial. She claimed the lab results were faked. She claimed the mugshots were digital manipulations. She claimed I was a senile mastermind who had orchestrated a frame job to destroy her. And Tyrone, my poor poisoned son, lay on the floor, struggling to breathe, his eyes clouding with confusion. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her because the alternative was too horrific to accept. I knew that papers and mugshots were not enough. A man in love, even a dying one, will find a way to rationalize the truth away. I needed something visceral. I needed something he could see with his own eyes. I needed the one witness Victoria had underestimated because she was small and quiet. "Zoe," I called out again. my voice steady despite the chaos. "Zoe, baby, bring the doll. Bring Mr. Bear." Victoria whipped her head around. Her eyes widened in genuine fear for the first time. She knew about the doll. She knew she had thrown it in the trash bin outside 2 days ago. She thought it was buried in a landfill. She did not know that I had fished it out. She did not know that I had cleaned it off and given it back to my granddaughter with specific instructions. From the shadows of the pantry, a small figure emerged. Zoe stepped into the light of the living room. She looked tiny amongst the armed agents and the shouting adults. Her pajamas were dusted with flour from hiding in the pantry. Her face was streaked with tears, but her jaw was set. She held the ragged, one-eyed teddy bear against her chest like a shield. "Get away from her," Victoria shrieked, taking a step toward her daughter. "Do not listen to him. Zoe, Grandpa is sick. Give Mommy the bear." She lunged. It was a desperate, feral movement, but an FBI agent stepped into her path, his broad chest blocking her. "Stand back, ma'am," he ordered, his hand resting on his holster. Zoe did not flinch. She ran past her mother. She ran straight to me. I was still on my knees, my hands raised, but the officer guarding me stepped back, allowing her through. She threw herself into my arms, burying her face in my dirty maintenance uniform. I hugged her tight, smelling the innocence of shampoo and the dust of the pantry. "Did you keep it safe?" I whispered into her hair. She nodded against my chest. She reached into the back of the bear where the stuffing was coming out of a torn seam. Her small fingers dug around inside the plush body. She pulled out a small black square, an SD card. Victoria gasped. The sound was like the air leaving a tire. She knew exactly what was on that card. I took the card from Zoe's hand. It was warm. I looked at Paris. "This is it," I said. "This is the smoking gun." Paris nodded. He took the card from me with the reverence of a priest handling a relic. He walked over to the police sergeant's laptop, which was set up on the dining table for processing the scene. "Wait," Victoria yelled. "You cannot use that. That is illegal surveillance. That is inadmissible." She was spouting legal terms she had learned from TV, desperate to stop the inevitable. "Probable cause," Paris said calmly, plugging the card into the reader. "And exigent circumstances. And the fact that this was recorded by a minor in her own home for her own protection." He tapped a few keys. He connected the laptop to the large television screen mounted above the fireplace. The smart TV flickered to life. A loading icon spun for a heart-stopping second. Then the video appeared. The angle was low shot from the perspective of a toy left on the kitchen counter. It framed the kitchen island perfectly. The timestamp in the corner read, 2 days ago, 9:30 p.m. Victoria appeared on screen. She was wearing her silk robe. She looked relaxed, happy even. She was humming a soft melody. It was a lullaby, the same lullaby she used to sing to Zoe. On the counter in front of her sat a glass of warm milk. Steam curled up from the surface. Beside it sat the glass vial of white powder, the digitalis. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the breathing of the men and the audio from the TV speakers. On screen, Victoria uncorked the vial. She did not measure the powder. She poured a generous amount into the milk. She picked up a spoon and stirred it, the metal clinking against the glass with a cheerful rhythm. She lifted the glass to the light, inspecting it. She smiled. It was not the smile of a wife making a nightcap for her husband. It was the smile of a predator watching a trap snap shut. Then she spoke. She spoke to the empty room, but really she was speaking to her future. "Drink up, honey," she cooed to the glass of poisoned milk. $5 million is waiting for me. I am so tired of waiting for you to die." She laughed. It was a low, throaty sound. She took a sip of her own wine glass, toasted the poisoned milk, and turned to walk out of the frame. The video ended. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence was heavy, suffocating, absolute. It was the silence of a truth so undeniable that it sucked the air out of the room. Every eye turned to Victoria. She stood frozen. Her face was gray. Her mouth hung open slightly. The mask was gone. There was no grieving widow left. There was no concerned mother. There was only Rebecca Thorne, the Black Widow, stripped bare for the world to see. Then a sound broke the silence. It was a guttural, animalistic howl, a sound of pure agony and rage. It came from the floor. Tyrone was staring at the black television screen. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and terrifyingly clear. The shock had burned through the fog of the poison. The adrenaline of betrayal had jump-started his failing heart. He saw the woman he loved pouring death into his cup. He heard her laugh about his murder. He heard her count the money she would make from his corpse. He let out a scream that tore at his throat. It was the sound of a man whose soul was being ripped in half. No, Tyrone roared. He moved. It was impossible, but he moved. He grabbed the IV pole the paramedics had set up. He ripped the needle out of his arm. Blood sprayed across the floor, bright red on the hardwood. He didn't care. He scrambled to his feet. He swayed his legs weak, his body dying but his rage holding him upright. Victoria, he screamed. He lunged. He threw himself across the room toward her. He wasn't a husband anymore. He was a force of nature. He crashed into the coffee table, sending it flying. He stumbled, but he kept going. Victoria screamed and tried to back away, but she hit the wall. Tyrone reached her. His hands, shaking but strong with fury, grabbed her by the shoulders. He slammed her against the wall. Pictures rattled. The plaster cracked. Why, he screamed into her face. Why, I loved you. I gave you everything. Victoria looked at him, her eyes wide with terror. She saw her death in his eyes. Get him off me, she shrieked. He is crazy. The police officers surged forward. They grabbed Tyrone. It took 3 of them to pull him off her. He fought them. He kicked and thrashed his eyes, never leaving her face. You killed me, Tyrone yelled, his voice breaking into sobs. You killed us! His strength gave out. The adrenaline crashed. His legs buckled and he collapsed into the arms of the officers. They lowered him gently to the floor. He lay there weeping, his chest heaving, his heart breaking in a way that medicine could never fix. I watched my son fall. I watched the woman who destroyed him slide down the wall, gasping for breath, checking her neck for bruises. I stood up. The officer who had been guarding me stepped aside. He looked at me with new eyes. He saw the soldier now. I walked over to Tyrone. I knelt beside him. I took his hand. It was cold and clammy. I am here, son, I whispered. I am here. Tyrone looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears and shame. Dad, he choked out, I am so sorry. You tried to tell me. You tried to save me. Shh, I said, stroking his hair. Save your strength. We got her. It is over. I looked up at Paris. He was standing over Victoria, looking down at her with the cold judgment of the law. Officer Paris said to the sergeant, I believe you have everything you need. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, identity theft, and that is just for starters. The sergeant nodded. His face was grim. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. He walked over to Victoria. Stand up, he ordered. Victoria looked up at him. She looked at Tyrone weeping on the floor. She looked at me holding my son. She looked at Zoe, who was watching from the safety of the FBI agent's arms. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood up slowly, smoothing her dress. She held out her wrists. You are all idiots, she hissed. I almost got away with it. If it wasn't for that meddling old man. I stood up and looked her in the eye. That meddling old man built fighter jets, Rebecca, I said. You should have done your research. The sergeant clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. Victoria Carter, also known as Rebecca Thorne. You are under arrest, he recited. As they led her away, she looked back one last time. Not at Tyrone. At me. Her eyes promised revenge. But I wasn't afraid. I had faced death before. I had faced loss. And tonight I had faced the devil in my own living room and won. But as the door closed behind her, I knew the night wasn't over. I turned to the sergeant. There is one more thing, I said. The sergeant looked at me exhausted. What is it, Mr. Carter? I pointed toward the garage door. The boat, I said. You need to turn over the boat. Why? The sergeant asked. We have the poison. We have the video. Because I said, my voice heavy with the weight of the final secret. The poison isn't the only thing she kept. She likes trophies. Trophies. Yes, I said. I saw the box, but I didn't open the bottom compartment. But I know what is in there. I smelled it. Smelled what death, Sergeant. Old death. I walked toward the garage. The FBI agents followed me. Paris followed me. We walked down the stairs into the cold garage. The boat sat there innocuous and silent. Flip it, I ordered. 2 agents grabbed the gunnels of the wooden canoe. They heaved. The boat flipped over with a crash. The false bottom I had discovered was there. But there was another panel deeper down near the keel. A panel I hadn't had time to open. Open it, I said. An agent pried the wood loose with a crowbar. It splintered and gave way. The smell hit us instantly. It wasn't just the bitter almonds of the poison. It was something earthier, something dusty and final. The agent shone his light into the cavity. Inside, nestled in velvet, were 3 urns, 3 brass urns, and beside them, in a clear plastic bag, was a collection that made the sergeant retch. Gold teeth, wedding rings, and locks of hair. 3 husbands, 3 trophies. She carried them with her. She kept them under her boat, sailing on a river of blood. The silence in the garage was absolute. I looked at the urns. I thought of Althea. Thank God she was buried in the churchyard. Thank God she wasn't in a box in this garage. She is a monster, Paris whispered. Yes, I said. And we just cut off her head. The handcuffs clicked shut around Victoria's wrists with a sound that felt like the closing of a heavy book. She stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by FBI agents and local police, her face a mask of cold fury. She did not look at Tyrone, who was being loaded onto a stretcher by the paramedics, an oxygen mask covering his face. She did not look at Zoe, who buried her face in my shoulder. She looked only at me. Her eyes were 2 chips of blue ice, promising a vengeance that would transcend prison walls. The sergeant took her by the arm to lead her out. "Let us go, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice rough with disgust. "Or should I say Ms. Thorne?" "Wait," I said. My voice was hoarse from the smoke and the shouting, but it cut through the noise of the room. "Do not take her yet." The sergeant stopped. He looked at me exasperated. "Mr. Carter, she is in custody. The paramedics need to work. We have the evidence." "What more do you want?" I gently handed Zoe to the FBI agent who had protected her earlier. "Stay here, baby," I whispered. "Do not look." I walked toward the sergeant. I stepped close to Victoria. I smelled the fear coming off her now, mixing with her expensive perfume. "You think you know what she is?" I said to the sergeant, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "You think she is just a black widow who poisons men for money. But you do not know the half of it." Victoria sneered. "You are a senile old fool, Winston. You got lucky." I turned to the sergeant. "The boat," I said. "You need to flip the boat over again." "We already looked at the boat," the sergeant argued. "You said there were papers. We have the papers." "Not the false bottom," I said. "The keel. The spine of the boat. I smelled it when I was down there. I smelled something old. Something that does not belong in a garage." Victoria's face changed. The sneer vanished. Her skin went the color of old parchment. She began to struggle against the sergeant's grip. "No," she shrieked. "You have no right. That is my property. Get away from it." Her reaction was all the confirmation I needed. She wasn't just hiding papers. She was hiding something she valued far more than money. "Bring her," I commanded. "She needs to see this." I walked toward the garage door. Paris followed me. 2 FBI agents grabbed Victoria and dragged her along her heels, skidding on the floor as she fought them. We went down the stairs into the cool, damp air of the garage. The wooden canoe lay on the concrete floor, flipped over from my earlier search. The false bottom where the papers had been was open and empty. "Flip it over completely," I told the agents. "Expose the keel structure." 2 agents grabbed the gunnels and heaved. The boat groaned as it was turned onto its side, exposing the heavy wooden beam that ran the length of the bottom. It looked solid. It looked like structural oak, but I knew construction. I knew how weight was distributed, and I knew that boat was too heavy for its size. "Give me a crowbar," I said. An officer handed me a heavy steel pry bar from his belt. I weighed it in my hand. My arthritis flared, but I ignored it. I approached the boat. I jammed the tip of the crowbar into the seam where the keel met the hull. I hammered it in with the palm of my hand. Victoria screamed. It was a raw, animalistic sound. "Stop him! He is destroying evidence!" I pulled. The wood creaked. It held fast. I put my boot against the hull and pulled with everything I had. With a loud crack that sounded like a gunshot, the wood split. A long section of the keel came away. It was hollow. The smell hit us instantly. It was not the chemical smell of the garage. It was not the bitter almond of the poison. It was a thick, cloying stench of musk and decay, of dust and dry bone. It was the smell of a tomb that had been sealed for years and suddenly violated. The sergeant covered his nose and mouth with his hand. Paris took a step back, gagging. I shone the flashlight into the hollow cavity. Nestled inside, wrapped in purple velvet bags, were 3 brass objects. They sat in a row perfectly spaced like trophies on a shelf. I reached in. My hand shook not from age but from the sheer horror of what I was touching. I pulled the first bag out. It was heavy. I loosened the drawstring and let the velvet fall away. It was an urn, a small polished brass urn. I pulled out the second one, then the third. 3 urns. 3 husbands. She had not just killed them. She had kept them. She had cremated them and packed them into her boat so she could carry them with her wherever she went. She was literally sailing on the remains of her victims. But that was not all. At the very end of the cavity, shoved into the deepest recess, was a clear, heavy-duty plastic freezer bag. I pulled it out. It jangled. I held it up to the light. The sergeant retched and turned away, vomiting onto the concrete floor. One of the FBI agents looked pale, his hand gripping his service weapon as if he wanted to shoot the bag. Inside the bag were teeth, gold teeth, molars with amalgam fillings, and rings. 3 heavy gold wedding bands, and tied with ribbons were 3 locks of hair, 1 gray, 1 brown, 1 red. She had harvested them. Before she burned them, she had taken pieces of them. She had pulled the gold from their mouths and the rings from their dead fingers. I looked at Victoria. She was not struggling anymore. She was staring at the bag in my hand with a look of pure, unadulterated hunger. She looked like a child whose favorite toy had been taken away. "Those are mine," she whispered. "Give them back." The silence in the garage was absolute, save for the sound of the sergeant spitting on the floor. It was a silence born of a horror so deep it defied language. We were standing in a suburban garage next to a lawnmower and a bicycle, looking at the collection of a serial killer. "You kept them," I said, my voice quiet. "You kept them all. They belong to me," she hissed. "I earned them." The FBI agent in charge stepped forward. He looked at the urns, then at the bag of teeth, then at Victoria. His face was hard as stone. "You are a monster," he said. Victoria laughed. It was a high, brittle sound that made my skin crawl. "I am a survivor," she spat. "I did what I had to do. They were weak men, useless men. They existed to serve me. And when they were done serving, I disposed of them, just like I was going to dispose of your pathetic son." She looked at me then, and the mask fell away completely. There was no more pretense of the loving daughter-in-law. There was no more fake concern. There was only hate. Pure, distilled hate. "And you," she screamed, her face twisting into a snarl. "You dirty old man. You should have died in that asylum. You should have rotted in your own filth." She lunged at me, snapping her teeth like a wild dog straining against the handcuffs. The agents held her back, but she thrashed and kicked, her eyes rolling in her head. "I hated touching you," she screamed. "I hated living in this house with you people, you and your stupid son. I hated the smell of you. I hated your skin. I hated everything about you." She unleashed a torrent of slurs, words I had not heard since I was a young man in the segregated South, words that were meant to strip me of my humanity. She called Tyrone names that made the officers flinch. She called Zoe a mongrel. She revealed herself completely. She was not just a killer for money. She was a bigot. She was a hateful, racist predator who had infiltrated our home, married a black man, and birthed a mixed-race child, all while despising the very blood that ran through their veins. She had lived with us, eaten with us, and smiled at us all while holding a hatred so deep it rotted her from the inside out. The sergeant wiped his mouth and stood up. He looked at her with a disgust that went beyond professional judgment. "Get her out of here," he ordered. "Get her out of my sight before I forget my badge." The agents dragged her toward the stairs. She fought them every step of the way. She screamed curses. She screamed about her money. She screamed for her trophies. "Do not touch my things," she shrieked as they hauled her up the steps. "Those are my husband's. They are mine." Her voice faded as they dragged her out to the waiting squad car, but the echo of her hate remained in the garage, hanging in the air like a poisonous fog. I stood there holding the bag of teeth. I looked at the urns. I thought about Althea, my sweet, gentle Althea. "Thank God," I whispered. "Thank God she died in the hospital. Thank God we buried her in the church plot. Thank God she is not in this boat." Paris walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. His hand was trembling. "Winston," he said softly, "put it down. It is evidence now." I placed the bag of teeth on the workbench next to the urns. I wiped my hand on my pants, trying to get the feel of the death off my skin. "I am sorry, Paris," I said. "I am sorry you had to see that." Paris shook his head. "Do not be sorry. You stopped her. You stopped her before she could add Tyrone to the collection." I looked at the boat, the vessel she claimed she was restoring. It was a hearse. It was a mobile graveyard. "Burn it," I said. "When the police are done with it, burn it to ash." I turned and walked toward the stairs. My legs felt heavy. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. I needed to see my son. I needed to see Zoe. I walked up into the kitchen. The house was full of cops and agents tagging evidence, taking photos. The party guests had long fled. I walked into the living room. The paramedics were gone. Tyrone was gone. "Where is he?" I asked the nearest officer. "They took him to County General," the officer said. "He is alive, Mr. Carter, but it is critical. You should go." I nodded. I looked for Zoe. She was sitting on the sofa surrounded by a female officer who was speaking to her gently. She still held the teddy bear. Zoe looked up and saw me. She jumped off the sofa and ran to me. I caught her and lifted her up, groaning as my back protested. "Is the bad lady gone?" she whispered. "Yes, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "The bad lady is gone. She is never coming back. Is Daddy okay?" "Daddy is sick," I said, "but Daddy is strong, and we are going to go see him right now." I carried her out of the house. I walked past the flashing lights. I walked past the neighbors gawking from their lawns. I walked toward the ambulance that was waiting to take us to the hospital. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the life we had before tonight. That life was over, burned down by the truth. But as I sat in the back of the ambulance holding my granddaughter's hand, I knew one thing for certain. We were survivors. We had walked through the fire and we had come out the other side. Scared, burnt, but alive. And for the first time in a long time, the monster under the bed was gone, because I had dragged her out into the light and shown the world exactly what she was. 6 months after the nightmare in my living room, I sat in the back row of a courtroom in Dallas, Texas. The air conditioning was humming, but sweat still trickled down the back of my neck. Beside me sat Paris, who looked grim but satisfied. In front of us, standing before a judge in an orange jumpsuit, was the woman I had known as Victoria. She looked smaller now. Her hair was dull and matted her roots, showing dark brown. The arrogance that had defined her was gone, replaced by a feral desperation. She was not being tried for the attempted murder of Tyrone or me. The state of Maryland had agreed to step aside. Texas wanted her first. They had exhumed her first husband, Jim, and found enough arsenic in his bones to kill a herd of cattle. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at her. He spoke with a slow drawl that carried the weight of the ultimate judgment. "Rebecca Thorne," he said, using her real name for the record. "For the premeditated murder of James Miller and the aggravating circumstances of your serial predation, this court sentences you to death by lethal injection." The courtroom erupted. Rebecca did not scream this time. She did not fight. She simply collapsed. Her legs gave out, and she fell to the floor in a heap of orange fabric, sobbing silently. It was not a cry of remorse. It was the cry of a predator who realized the trap had finally snapped shut on her own leg. I watched her being dragged away by the bailiffs. She looked back one last time, scanning the crowd. She was looking for Tyrone. She wanted him to save her. She wanted him to be the shield one last time. But Tyrone was not there. My son was hundreds of miles away, sitting in a dialysis chair in a clinic in Baltimore. The digitalis had ravaged his kidneys. He had survived the heart failure, but his body was broken. He spent 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, hooked up to a machine that cleaned his blood because his own organs could no longer do the job. I flew back that night to be with him. I walked into the clinic and saw him. He looked 10 years older than me. His skin was papery and thin, his eyes sunken. He was watching the blood flow through the clear tubes, a rhythmic reminder of how close he had come to the end. When he saw me, he tried to stand up. The nurses rushed over to stop him, but he waved them away. He unhooked the blanket from his lap. He slid out of the chair, his legs shaking violently. He ignored the alarms beeping on the machine. He dropped to his knees right there on the cold tile floor of the clinic. He bowed his head until his forehead touched my shoes. "Dad," he sobbed, his voice racking his entire body. "I am so sorry. I was blind. I was weak. I let her into our house. I let her near Zoe. I chose her over you." I looked down at my son. I saw the shame radiating off him in waves. He was broken, not just physically, but spiritually. He had built his life on a lie, and it had almost cost him everything. I reached down and gripped his shoulders. They felt fragile under my hands. "Stand up, son," I said, my voice firm but gentle. "Carters do not kneel. We stand. We face our mistakes, and we fix them." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "Can you ever forgive me?" I pulled him to his feet and hugged him. He smelled of antiseptic and regret. "I forgave you the moment I broke out of that asylum," I whispered. "But forgiveness does not mean forgetting. You have a long road ahead, Tyrone, and you are going to walk it on your own 2 feet. The road to recovery was not just medical, it was financial. Victoria had drained Tyrone dry. His savings were gone. His retirement accounts were empty. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. He was bankrupt. He expected to lose everything. He expected us to be homeless. He sat at the kitchen table a week later, staring at a stack of foreclosure notices, his head in his hands. "We are going to lose the house, Dad," he said, his voice hollow. "I have nothing left. I cannot provide for Zoe. I am a failure." I stood at the stove making coffee. I poured 2 mugs and set one in front of him. Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not a bill. It was a contract. I slid it across the table. "What is this?" Tyrone asked, wiping his eyes. "Open it," I said. He unfolded the paper. It was a sale agreement. But it was not for the house. It was for a patent. Patent number US 884201. Improved fuel injection system for high-altitude turbines. Tyrone looked up at me confused. You have a patent." I sat down and took a sip of my coffee. "I told you I worked in logistics, Tyrone. I never told you I stopped inventing. I designed this system 20 years ago in the garage. The Air Force used a version of it, but I kept the commercial rights. I never sold it because I wanted to keep a low profile. I wanted to live a simple life with your mother, but simple does not mean poor." I pointed to the bottom line of the contract. The sale price. Tyrone's eyes widened. $20 million, he whispered. "You have $20 million. I nodded. "The check cleared yesterday. I bought the house back from the bank this morning. It is in my name." Tyrone stared at me. Hope flooded his face. A desperate, hungry hope. "Dad, that is amazing. We are saved. We can pay off the debts. We can hire the best doctors. We can get a new car. We can start over." I leaned forward. My face hardened. I saw the same weakness in his eyes that Victoria had exploited. The desire for the easy way out, the belief that money could fix a broken character. "No, Tyrone," I said. "We are not doing any of that." He blinked. "What?" "But you said you have the money." "I have the money," I corrected him. "You have nothing." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard where Zoe was playing. "I am not giving you a dime, son. Not for your debts, not for a car, not for a lifestyle you cannot afford." Tyrone looked like I had slapped him. "But Dad, I am sick. I am broke." "You are alive," I said, turning back to him. "And you are going to stay that way. But you are going to learn. You are going to learn what it means to build a life, not just inherit one." I paid off the medical bills because that is what a father does. I secured a trust for Zoe's education because she is innocent. "But you are going back to work." "Work?" he asked incredulously. "I cannot go back to the firm. My reputation is ruined." "I know," I said. "That is why you are not going to be an architect. You are going to be a mechanic." I tossed a set of keys onto the table. They were greasy and old. "I bought the old auto shop on Main Street," I said. "It needs work. The roof leaks. The lifts are rusted. You start Monday, you are going to sweep the floors. You are going to change oil. You are going to learn how to fix things with your hands. You are going to sweat. And you are going to earn every single dollar you make." Tyrone looked at the keys. He looked at his soft, manicured hands. "I don't know anything about cars, Dad." "Then you better start reading," I said. "Because that is your only option. You want to be a man, Tyrone. You want to be a father. Zoe can look up to. Then stop looking for a handout and start looking for a wrench." He stared at the keys for a long time. I watched him struggle. I watched him fight the urge to argue, the urge to beg. But then he looked out the window at Zoe. He saw his daughter safe and happy. He realized that I had saved her, not with money, but with grit. He picked up the keys. His hand trembled, but he closed his fist around them. "Okay, Dad," he whispered. Monday. That weekend we had a bonfire. It was not a celebration. It was a funeral for the past. We dragged the wooden canoe out of the garage, the boat that had hidden the poison, the boat that had carried the remains of 3 dead men. We dragged it into the middle of the backyard. I doused it in gasoline. The smell was sharp and cleansing. Zoe stood beside me holding a box of matches. She looked at the boat. She knew what had been inside it. We had told her the truth. We did not lie to her. She deserved to know that monsters were real, but that they could be beaten. "Do you want to do it?" I asked her. She nodded. She struck the match. The flame flared to life, illuminating her serious little face. She tossed it onto the wood. The gasoline caught with a whoosh. Orange flames roared up, consuming the varnish and the wood. The heat pushed us back. We watched it burn. We watched the false bottom turn to ash. We watched the hiding place of evil crumble into embers. Tyrone stood on the porch watching. He did not come closer. He knew this was something Zoe and I had to do together. We were the ones who had found the secret. We were the ones who had ended it. As the fire died down to glowing coals, I put my arm around my granddaughter. "It is gone, baby," I said. "It can never hurt us again." She leaned into me. "Grandpa." "Yes." "Can we get a new boat?" "A good boat?" I smiled. "I think we can arrange that." 2 months later, the sun was rising over the Chesapeake Bay. The water was glass calm, reflecting the pink and orange of the dawn. We were 5 miles out, sitting in a 20-foot center console fishing boat. It was white and pristine. The name painted on the stern in bold blue letters was the Althea II. I sat at the helm, checking the depth finder. Tyrone was at the stern baiting a hook. His hands were stained with grease and oil. His fingernails were dirty. He looked tired, but he looked stronger. The dialysis was working, and the hard labor at the shop was putting muscle back on his frame. He wasn't the soft architect anymore. He was becoming a man of substance. Zoe sat next to me wearing a life jacket that was a little too big. She was holding a fishing rod, her eyes fixed on the bobber floating in the water. She looked peaceful. The terror that had haunted her eyes for months was gone, replaced by the focused determination of a fisherman. "Grandpa," she asked without looking away from the water. Were you scared?" I looked at her. I thought about the asylum. I thought about the vent shaft. I thought about the gun in my hand and the woman holding a knife to her throat. When I asked, "When you came back, when you broke out, were you scared she would kill you?" I cut the engine. The boat drifted into silence, broken only by the lap of water against the hull and the cry of a seagull overhead. I looked at Tyrone. He stopped baiting the hook and looked at us, waiting for the answer. I leaned down close to Zoe. I took off my glasses and wiped them on my shirt. "Zoe," I said softly, "I have faced many things in my life. I have seen engines fail at 30,000 feet. I have seen men stronger than me break. But that night in the living room holding that gun, I was not scared for myself." She looked up at me, her brown eyes wide and searching. "Then what were you scared of?" I smiled and brushed a stray curl of hair from her forehead. "I was only scared of losing you," I said. Zoe smiled. It was a real smile, bright and unburdened. "You didn't lose me, Grandpa," she said. "You found me." She turned back to her fishing rod. I looked at Tyrone. He nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement of the second chance we had all been given. I engaged the throttle and the Althea II pushed forward, cutting a clean white wake through the dark water, moving us away from the shore, away from the past, and into the open sea. We were scarred. We were different. But we were together. And for the first time in a long time, the horizon looked clear. Here is the lesson learned and the call to action for the story. Lesson learned. This story teaches us that true family is defined by loyalty and love, not just blood. We learned that evil often hides behind a smiling face and that the people closest to us can sometimes be the most dangerous. But more importantly, Winston showed us that age does not equal weakness. Wisdom, patience, and the courage to protect the innocent are the greatest weapons against greed. It is never too late to stand up for yourself, to break free from toxic relationships, and to rebuild a life filled with dignity and peace. We must always trust our instincts and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Call to action. If Winston's bravery inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more powerful life stories, and let me know in the comments, do you think Tyrone deserved a second chance? I'll see you in the next story.